I'm unmuted.
You're unmuted and you're on the show. Hey,
Oh, I am.
Darrell.
Hi.
It's Monday and you're an awesome person, so this makes perfect sense to me.
Mondays are awesome, people.
Monday, Mondays I talk to awesome people, and you are one of those people. And
Thanks,
I'm
Andrew.
I'm glad this is happening. We've been trying to do this for a little while, but you are a
Yeah,
very, very
I
busy
apologize
man.
to everybody. It's been a little bit nutty for me to get in here, but here I am.
Here you are.
Rock us like a hurricane.
Really? You going there?
Gen X, man. I can't help it.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. Look, I met you a really long time ago,
Yes.
but we got shit to talk about before even that point.
That's kind of when my shit started.
Well, yeah, but that's not when everything started. And I like to go all the way back to the beginning because I think that the reason people decide to do it is as fascinating as what they do once they're actually doing it.
Oh, okay. All the way,
So if
way
you don't
back.
mind, so you're born in Illinois. We got that
Yes.
part. You
Yes.
moved around a lot.
A little bit.
Well, a bit, right? So Arizona, LA, San Diego, back to Arizona. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot of moving by the age of 9.
Yeah.
So was that usually that stuff is parent job related? I'm assuming
Correct.
something like that.
Yes.
So and do you have siblings?
No.
No. Was there a bunch of music going on in your house?
Yes, but nothing we'd like to talk about.
All right. So is that because it was like cheesy
Yeah.
or yeah, okay. Look, man, everybody thinks their parents' music is cheesy.
No.
Well,
So
that's not true.
I grew up in a, Christian conservative household.
Right.
Even though my dad and my mom, they were fans of music, and then my dad was a huge Beatles fan. Um, but funny though, when I was growing up, I don't remember really hearing the Beatles being played in the house. It was a lot of Christian contemporary type stuff, which is just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I
there's
mean,
a
I think now it's across all genres, and there's some stuff that even if you're not into it, like ignore the lyrics and the music. But yeah, there was a time where it was very specific.
almost like you could use the analogy of like if ACDC tried to reinvent themselves as a rap group, all of their fans would go, "Huh?" It's
Yeah.
this their market they're going for. And
So, all right. So, did you discover music like at friends' houses and stuff? Like,
houses, and quite frankly, I was teenager-ish, and then we got cable. Finally, this a magical thing called cable and the cable box and music television. Wow, there's a half-naked hot chick dancing on a car. This is cool. And the rest is all downhill.
right, right. Yeah. So MTV, basically.
Yeah, man. And I remember, man, me and my friend Ansel, we'd get out of school. He lived closer to the school than I did. So we'd get out of school, and his house was maybe 4 blocks away or 3 blocks away. So we'd walk to his house and hit TRL live at what, 3:30 or 4 o'clock it was on
Right.
every, and we'd just sit there for an hour and a half and just that was our version of porn, and just watch that. And it was all hair metal then,
Yeah. So we're
pretty much.
talking like late '80s, right?
Ladies, yeah, 80, 86, 7, 8, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. There was a little ZZ Top in there, wasn't it, or was that '90s?
yeah. Of course, there was more credible music than hair metal, but yes,
Yeah.
Metallica.
Yeah. The
I
police still had some shit going on at that point, I think.
well, I remember, yeah, because I remember, dude, when did Injustice for All come out? 88, maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe. I remember hearing Injustice for All. And then funny enough, you were in my town, you were either kind of split down the middle. You were either a GNR grungy kind of person, or you were a hair metal or metal
Now,
person.
interesting that GNR falls on the grungy side of that
To
divide.
me, it does. To me, it does. Like all my the when people talk about Guns N' Roses, I just have these flashbacks of my friends who I'm not sure why I was friends with them because we didn't really have that much in common. But they were massive Guns N' Roses fans, but not necessarily Appetite. It was more to do with Lies.
Wow. Because
Yeah,
they were, obviously a huge part of the LA rock scene, which was the hair metal scene, not,
totally.
and they're part of the scene that got destroyed the day Nevermind came out, basically.
Yes. Yeah, and it's funny to me because I have a very very good friend of mine. She grew up in LA, grew up in the Beverly Hills area, and was at 16. She's like 2 years old, 2 or 3 years older than me. So at 16, 17, going to the Roxy and seeing Guns N' Roses headline, which is like seeing that whole LA metal scene just emerge from erupt, should I say, and then transform across the United States and America
Yeah.
from, which is just mind numbing for me to think about, And meanwhile, she was seeing bands play on the Sunset Strip, sneaking in illegally, by the way.
Of course.
And I was watching them on TRL in Tucson, Arizona. Like it was just kind of like, wow. And it was weird growing up in Tucson because not a lot of bands like to roll through there. They usually just hit Phoenix and go.
Right, right.
Because it's such a close, Tucson and Phoenix are an hour and a half apart from each other. So most major acts would just hit Phoenix and then call it. And then once in a blue moon, like I saw Metallica in Tucson when on the Black album tour.
Right.
It was cool. Really cool.
So, like, what were your favorite bands then? I mean, because you're seeing all kinds of stuff at that point. So, what were you gravitating towards? Obviously, Metallica.
Yeah, Metallica was one, but I didn't get into Metallica until the Black album, funny enough. And then I
That's
loved,
a lot of people didn't get into them till the Black Album.
yeah, but once I kind of grasped the Black album, I went back to the older catalog, and then you just realize how good of a freaking record Injustice for All is as well. Just, dude,
Yeah.
just straight. Because that was more, to me, that's more of like a metal record where the Black album is a little bit more, it's got a pop kind of mainstream influence to it. I'm not necessarily sure if that's what they were going for, but it's a
No,
little
but I mean, it's the Bob Rock thing.
who are not metal people.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's we talked about it with Bob a couple weeks ago, and yeah, absolutely. That made them household names, and they were not that before at all.
No. Who'd have thunk?
Yeah. So, all right, going back to the earlier childhood stuff, you actually spent a few years, like 5 years in San Diego, right? Something like that?
About three.
About three. And you're pretty into it then.
Yes.
And then moving to Arizona, were you in Tucson or were you outside of it?
We moved to a small town outside of Tucson called Oracle, which was a small mining town. We lived there for maybe 2 years, and then 2 years, 2.5 years. And then mom and dad finally then dad finally just got a job working inside Tucson proper, and he was driving 45 one way. Funny, which is what I fucking do now. He was driving out 2 hours every day, and plus he had to be at work at 6 something in the morning. So we moved to Tucson and bought a house on the west side of Tucson.
Right.
So,
but going out of San Diego, sort of at the age where you're starting to really kind of realize what is going on, and moving to a tiny mining town, that was not good then at that point, I would imagine.
Yeah, like nostalgia wise, one of the, which really bummed me out the other day when I don't know why I did the research and looked into it. One of my favorite shows growing up as a kid was Simon and Simon. And the reason we watched that is because it was set in San Diego. And then funny enough, I realized a year or two ago, I did the research, and that was actually filmed all in Marina Del Rey.
Well, Marina Del Rey is your San Diego. That's all right.
Pretty much. Yeah. But so So that was kind of like a culture shock of just sitting at home with 4 channels on the TV and absolutely nothing to do. And then watching the Simon and Simon credits open up as they drive across the Bay, the Coronado Bridge.
And feeling homesick.
Yeah. Terribly, yeah. So.
Man, so now I know you've played guitar in your life. Did you pick it up while you were outside of Tucson, or did that come a little later?
In Tucson, Dad. Funny enough, there was a music store back when they had these things called little mom and pop music shops. There was a music store like 2 blocks away from our house, and Dad had a day off, and we were just fumbling around. And Dad was like, "Hey, you want to go look at stuff?" So we went in the guitar shop and started playing, and he picked up a guitar and he started playing, and then literally noodling on notes because we didn't know chords then. And then he was like, let's buy a guitar. So we bought a guitar and we shared it basically. But Dad worked full time. So it was pretty much, I played it 24/7.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how I started my little guitar hobby. And then also the guy who kind of got me, the guy who got me into like the bug of the recording side, the technical side of our job, he's a great musician and a great guitar player. So I was always talking to him about guitars and things like that, and chords and chord structures and stuff. So it was kind of like a win-win he was like my guitar / music theory inspiration, plus also teaching me how to record.
Right.
So to jump ahead of things. So.
And that was in Tucson, or that's elsewhere?
Tucson, yeah.
Right. Wow. So did he just had a little setup and you recorded yourselves playing? And
so back to I met him at the church we attended. So I was 14 or 15 when I met him. And then he was just like, yeah, you want to come help out? And so I would help him out on Sundays. So it was kind of like a win-win for me. And then I started doing more and more stuff around the church, just in the live sound. And we had a radio show and da-da-da-da. These are all tape days. Like we were cutting 1/4-inch tape to put a radio show together.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So there wasn't a whole lot of multi-track things going on, but there was a little bit here and there. But it was pretty much just all live mix to mono, not to 2-track, and then editing dialogue and show sequencing down and kind of stuff like that. But so.
Man, there's no better way to learn to edit tape than editing people speaking. Getting the pacing right and all that kind of stuff. It's amazing.
Right, but I didn't really think about that. It wasn't until I started some years later in the late 90s in the music business where some people were starting to teach me how to edit on tape, musically edit on tape, when I was just kind of like, oh, that's how you're supposed to do it. Okay.
All right. So you're in Tucson. You're playing guitar. You've kind of got the recording bug a little bit, the technology bug about it. But then you join the Navy.
Yep.
So what's up with that?
The long point around it is for whatever reason, I had this like insane desire to just pretty much wanted to move to LA and work in a recording studio in some way, shape, or form. I didn't quite understand what that position was, but that's what I wanted to do. My problem was I was maybe too immature or too freaked out of making the big career move at 18 from the safety of home and the cost effectiveness of living at home at 18 versus moving to LA, which is double the expense at 18, even though, funny enough, back then 18, LA was kind of still cheap to live in.
Yeah.
Not Tucson cheap, but still not like it is now. So the Navy was a stepping stone for me to kind of force me to get my butt in gear and figure out what I wanted to do and what I wanted to chase.
Right.
it was also a maturing thing. It gave me the confidence of, I'm not with mom and dad anymore at home, but however, my room and rent is board and it's paid for, and da da da, and the freedom to be on my own and that kind of thing. So it was a big stepping stone in that aspect. At the same token, I feel like the Navy gave me a sense of the work ethic. The business has changed a lot since we started, Andrew. But when we started, it was just like, if you worked a 16-hour day, that was a slow fucking day.
Oh yeah.
If you worked a 20-hour day, that was kind of more like a normal day. I don't know if my stamina or mental capacity could have handled that big of a swap from, it's, if you don't want to work the 20 hours, then fine. I've got somebody else waiting around the corner that'll take your job in 2 seconds. Just say you can't handle this and there's no harm, no foul, and you're out. Because of my Navy training and stamina, I think I was able to kind of mentally take the 20-hour workday and survive it, quite frankly. Because a lot of my friends that wanted to be engineers, they moved off literally farms out in the Midwest, middle of nowhere, came to LA. They enjoyed the big city lifestyle, the entertainment factor. They didn't enjoy the fact that it was expensive to live. But they just, one morning they would wake up after a year and go, I can't do this. And I think a lot of it had to do with just the more of the working 20 hours a day, the production kind of, that this is how it is. And so you either survive or you don't. And so they would just make the call, and they moved, a lot of them moved back home just because they couldn't hack and they really truly wanted to be engineers. They wanted to be in the music business. They loved music. It was just the tenacity or the drive to keep going that they couldn't keep up with. So I kind of contribute that to my Navy days, because I would work, when we were underway in the Navy, I was working 14-hour days, pretty much 7 days a week.
Right.
But in a weird screwed up schedule where you work 5 hours on, 5 hours off, 7 hours on, 7 hours off, 5 hours on, 5 hours off, 7 hours on, 7 hours off. So you're not like I was ever sleeping when I was an assistant.
Right.
The rhythm of that, it's just so not natural, where you get, quote unquote 8 hours of downtime to sleep 7 hours. And it's really grueling, really, really grueling. And that goes on for months and months and months and months. So I think that's why the Navy, quite honestly.
And had you considered like trying to find a recording school or anything like that, or it really wasn't even an option?
The other thing for me too was I was really torn. I couldn't decide whether it was, do I go to college? I was looking at USC. I was looking at University of Miami. My friend Rafa, who got me into this thing, he was pushing me like, hey, if you really want to do this, go to University of Miami. It wasn't crazy expensive at that time. It was still, quite a lot of money. I've got a couple friends that went to, well, you went to Miami, for crying out loud.
Guilty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not that great of a student, funny enough. So I was really nervous about putting myself in the situation with a 4-year degree and trying to meet those expectations of being a student.
Right.
I don't do well in the classroom setting. I never have. I struggled in high school a lot. So I wasn't sure if college was the right direction. So then there was like, oh, we'll go to recording school. Okay. But then funny enough, at the time, I only there might've been LARW then in LA.
Yeah, I think so. I think that would have been around. But I mean, there were a lot of small, really short programs, but there weren't that many sort of in between. Correct.
Not like there are now with the Conservatory where I went, and Full Sail, So, and I think it was somebody told me, or I read somewhere or somehow, it was kind of like this interesting thing where whether you go to a 4-year school or a college, you get a degree, or whether you go to Conservatory like I did, you kind of walk through the door going, hey, I'm here to assist. And like, no, you're here to sweep floors. Have fun.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, well, screw it. I'll just go to a trade school for a year and then get my feet wet that way. Like that was my mentality of it. Funny enough.
Right. Wait, so when you're talking about a conservatory, so what's that?
Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences in Arizona.
Okay, right. So and that was after the Navy or yeah.
In fact, I got out of the Navy early to go.
Wow.
The Navy, the military, I'm not going to say for the rest of the branches, but I think they are. But the Navy, for whatever reason, they are heavy, 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 all the way up from the command down. If you say you want to do anything with school, college, they're like, how can we help? What's your duty situation? Like one night, I was doing some extra classes just for the heck of it. And then I had duty, which is where you're supposed to stay on the ship the whole time. And so I went to my bosses and I was like, hey, I've got class tonight. And they're like, you have a fire drill. Then after the fire drill, you can leave. So they let me go. And I was a little late, but still they were in that any other circumstances, like, no, you can't leave the ship. No, you're on duty. So just that aspect. So then I put in a request to just get out 3 months early to go. And I said I wanted to go to start spring semester. And so the CO approved it. So.
Wow. So that worked out kind of perfectly. You got the kind of maturing and the work ethic and all of that kind of stuff, but also the support to go learn some shit afterwards.
Correct. So. Yeah, it's had its play. I mean, for me, dude, the Navy was a crazy experience. I don't regret it. Sometimes I do regret it. But this is how I look at it. I saw some places I'll probably never see again in my life, number one. Number two, I have this work ethic because of the Navy that I don't think I would ever get anything else. I'm really proud of the fact that I served. But, dude, I have... my closest friend, he lives in Ohio. I'm godfather to his two daughters. My friend Paul, who's still in, funny enough, lives in San Diego. I'm like uncle to his daughter, my niece, quote unquote. My friend Mark, who lives in Jersey. And then my friend Ralph, who lives in Philadelphia. Friend Thomas, who lives in Michigan now. And then there's my other friend Richard, who lives in Florida now. He just moved to Florida. But so it's like I have these handful of people that I'm still friends with after 27 years. It's pretty freaking crazy. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, I can only imagine the bonding in anything that's full on is deep.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, mind you, I wasn't in war with these people, which is a whole other.
Which is lucky because that's Gulf War time.
Post.
Right? Oh, post. Okay, so this is 92 or 3 then?
93.
Right, okay. Right, 93. So just post. So actually in a pretty good lull, actually.
Yeah.
That's very good timing, my friend.
Very good timing. Yep.
Wow. All right, so hold on. We got to get all this straight. So you also mentioned Rafa Sardinas. So when did you meet him, and how did he become somebody who would be recommending like what you should do?
I can't remember if I met Rafa at 14 or 15. What's funny is if I text him right now, I found him. We lost track of each other for years. And then I found him 15 years ago. And then, so once in a blue moon, we text. And then, but I remember him we were texting or talking or something on the phone maybe a year ago. And he was like, oh yeah, I met you in in 1990. And I was like, really? Okay, I can't remember that. And, he's like 15 or 18 years older than me. I can't believe he's just got this crazy, insane memory about like time and date places. And I can't remember what time my son ate his last meal at.
Well, kids eat all the time, man.
He just ate like 5 minutes ago? No, Darrell, he ate 2 hours ago. Oh, whoops.
So you met him, and he was
okay. So Rafa was like the chief engineer of the sound department. He ran all the church services, plus he played guitar, And then he also did the radio shows. And then at that time, because they had a big radio show presence, especially in Tucson and Southern Arizona, should I say, they made a bunch of worship albums as well. And he was recording or helping to record or mixing a lot of that stuff at the time too. So there was a lot of stuff going on. And then meantime, when he wasn't doing all that crazy madness, he was recording bands at the local studio in Tucson. So he was, like an engineer, just like so many fingers in the bowls of water, just da 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 da. So he had a lot going on, and so I just kept talking to him about, like, I think I want to do this, and he tried to get me a job at, there's 2 studios in town in Tucson. The one still exists. I have no idea if it's still the same original owners or anything like that, but because in case in point, because like Linda Ronstadt lives in Tucson, and she made a lot of her records in Tucson. Some came to LA, but I remember specifically like Alan Sides telling me, him knowing I was from Tucson, he's like, yeah, I went to Tucson so many times, man, with Linda. And then remember making a record with her, and then a couple nights a week she just reserved a room at this crazy Mexican restaurant up the street, and we would just leave the studio and go eat this insane Mexican meal, and da 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 da. I was like, yeah,
nice.
that sounds,
man. So it's great. I mean, Rafa, he sounds like the almost stereotype of the small town engineer, just doing anything that comes up to be doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is brilliant.
Brilliant. So yeah, he taught me a lot. He taught me just like the concepts of signal flow, and mind you, and this was more in the live sound setting than in the studio setting, but they do go hand in hand in certain ways. It's just we work a little differently in the behind the scenes, but microphone, mic preamp, EQ, sends, building mixes, all that stuff, running snakes, running cabling, thinking about IO, multi-tracks.
And did you ever hang out with him while he was working with any of the bands?
No, I never did, because back then I was a student. So
right.
Mind you, I was a younger student usually a lot of the time. So I could only get over there when my parents would let me. And that was the thing too. We lived on the west side, and the church we attended was way on the east side of town for whatever reason that happened. So it was kind of a schlep to go from town to town to town, from side to side to side. And so it wasn't actually until when I started driving, I actually was hired at the church, but Rafa had left.
Right.
So I was under somebody else there.
Right. Okay. All right. I think I've got this all straight in my head. Like, All right. And this is not the same Rafa who has won like 700 Latin Grammys. This would be a different Rafa. Just to clear the air. There is more than one Rafa in the world. Yeah. All right. So you get out of the Navy, you go do Crass, which at that point, how long was that program? It's
4 months.
4 months.
Now it's almost a year.
Right. So you get out of there. Your goal is always to get back to LA. And I'm assuming they've got like a placement program for the people coming out of there.
This is the big reason I went there. Did not like the idea of getting out of school and moving to LA and going, hey, I need a job. Here's my resume.
So they were instrumental in getting you your first gig then?
Yes.
And the first gig was Track Record?
Correct.
Okay, and this is where we met at Track Record.
Yeah.
Well, you tell the story of getting there, and then I'll probably interrupt you and tell the story of us meeting.
So I started Track, and then the Conservatory, they still have an internship program. I don't know how many hours it is now. I can't quite remember. But basically, when you graduated from Conservatory, you were supposed to intern somewhere for X amount of hours. Now, mind you, I did a fair amount of my interning too, like on nights and weekends in Arizona, because you could pick up extra work and people would sign off your hours and that kind of stuff. So that was cool. So, but when I was kind of hired at Track, they would basically just take in interns. They'd use the free labor for a month or two, and then if you were smart enough and knew your stuff enough, they would hire you. And so I worked there for, I think, 30 days. I think all I had was 38 days to do of 8 hours a day. And I was open and fun. And within 2 weeks, it was, what I found was really funny is they gave me the keys and said, open this studio up. Here's the alarm, which, you know, how many 47s were in that? You
I
know
was
what I
going to
mean?
say that would explain your mic collection.
Yes, exactly. But, so yeah, they were, so they obviously they trusted me, and they knew, they saw my work ethic pretty quickly. And so then after the 30 days, I was officially hired as a runner, and I started running, and then on the clock, funny enough. And there were some cool things that went through there, but track record was that in the heyday of the music business, and then Studio Row, quote unquote, and in Los Angeles, you had your top tier, your medium tier, and your small tier studio. I think track was like a medium tier where people would kind of camp out for a week or two just to do overdubs or cut a record because they were on a smaller budget, which is
But
fine.
facility-wise, it was pretty great. There wasn't anything second tier about the studio itself.
No, not at all. The mic collection was great.
SSL mix room, and what was in the tracking room at that point?
Well, it was a VR in the no, excuse me, it was a V3 in the tracking room.
Right.
The mix room was a 6K.
Right.
So,
but it was kind of a weird mix of clients too, right? Because you were getting rock stuff and a lot of the hip hop stuff that was starting to happen.
A lot our rock clients were going into the North room, which was the tracking room, which had the VR in it, and the tracking room itself was actually a really, really good tracking room.
Yeah.
Our hip hop clients were living in the South room, which is the SSL, and did a ton of death row stuff.
Right.
Death row label artists, blah blah blah. In the South, and so I ran for a while, and then I ran for a while, and then one of the assistants got in a huge argument. One of the assistants started this gig, and it was an R&B gig, funny enough, that was in the North room. And let me just press it. Maybe people have seen or know, but it was kind of funny because nowadays it's all soft synths, except for that beautiful piece of artwork behind your head.
Well,
which is a whole other level. But no, but back then it was just like they'd rent or carry in 20 keyboards and 3 or 4 drum machines and modular units of some sorts that was always controlled MIDI, and then you'd have like 22 or 3 3-tiered stands, and kind of go, shit, well, I guess I'll set it up this way. Then finally the producer and or programmer would walk in and, no, let's hear, this is how I like it, Darrell. Oh, okay, cool. And then you'd have to hook up like 30 stereo pairs, and some sites like MPCs have 10 outputs, or the 1600, that drum, was it the 2600? Is that it?
There were a lot of them, and they all had a lot of outputs.
Yeah. So depending on what the producer used, but most people just use an MPC, like a 3000. That was their main sequencer. And then, you patch all this stuff up and then bang SMPTE into the MPC. And then once you got it all up and running, it was pretty much easy peasy. The producer was just sitting there and start writing beats and stuff until he got to a point where he said, okay, I'm ready to print. And you put the tape machine online and then start just doing multiple passes till you got everything down. So it was actually quite really a simple gig, really, really. But the so this assistant who was there for 2 years or something like that, yeah, he got in a big fight with the studio manager and told the studio manager to go fuck himself and threw his keys at him and just walked out. And then literally Al, the studio manager, came out because the building was separate. It had like a main building, and then there was like a little like guest house almost thing where the runner's lounge was, and then there was a storage office, and then upstairs was another like a common lounge for the clients if they wanted. And literally, so I remember like Al just coming down, the back door swung open to the courtyard. Darrell, get in there. So that's how I started my assistant career.
All right, that'll work.
So yeah, so Al went in and told the client like, hey, I hate to do this to you. My ball, he just quit. Darrell's here. If you need anything, let him know. If you need any problems, let me know. I just want to make this transition. They were like, no, we're cool. I mean, we're already set up, running, go. So as long as Darrell knows, we can figure out where everything is. And I'm like, no, I can figure it out. So I did. I figured it all out. But then, and then after that, they were like, like I was in there for 2 days, and then because Al was like, well, this could be temporary. I could call in the other guy to take who is. I'm like, yeah. And then no, but then the client was like, no, we like Darrell, keep him in there. So I stayed.
Great.
That's how I started assisting. And it's a great stepping stone because you're not on a full-blown tracking gig where there's multiple headphones and It's literally just a bunch of inputs out of a keyboards going in. So you really, all you got to do is just make sure you're not screwing up the time code sync issues.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it's only worked on one machine at a time. So there was never a lot of multi-track syncing issues, just to keep it. Yeah. So.
And while you were running, were you spending a lot of time in the rooms shadowing and learning stuff? Or
yes. See, that was my thing, and I've told it's such a different scenario right now, but when I got to track and I started running there, and it looked like that I was going to become a permanent statue, I went in the rooms right away and I started making buddy with all the assistants. What do you need, dude? Need coffee? Need a burger? Da-da-da. Oh man, coffee would be great. Okay, cool. Here's your coffee. Oh, thanks, dude. Hey, how do you do this? Oh, well, you do that. Okay. Oh, the client's coming. I'll come back. Okay. Client leaves. Walk in. Hey man, what do you need? Oh, well, nothing right now. Oh, is the client gone? You want me to break down the room? Oh, yeah. You want to break down the room? Sure. That's what I did. And I see a lot of kids just don't. I don't know. No initiative, I guess you could say. So yeah. It was just going buddy. So I could, because I'll have to say this about Kraz has changed a lot and come a long way in the common years. But when I went there, they had just a Neotech and an AMEC console. And mind you, those two consoles were both inline consoles. But however, they, like all consoles, like every console that's ever made, their signal flow of it, or how you make point A to go to point B, is all a different stupid naming switch, blah, 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 blah. So walking in from the AMEC or the Neotech, which I felt like I knew pretty well, and is actually pretty straight ahead forward, the V3 is simple once you grab the concept, but at the same token, not simple when you're looking at it. Go, what's C/O mean? What's change? What's that changeover?
Yeah.
How do they fucking changeover? Or my favorite one, float.
Yeah.
Float it.
Yeah.
To the buses. Why? That's
just cause. Yeah, the MCI I learned on had a ping pong button instead of a float button. So there you go. But I think it's I mean, it's still the same now, I'm sure, if you can get in that situation. But I remember like how exciting it was to be allowed to break a room down. Like, I'm going to handle all these mics. I'm going to coil these cables. They're going to look fucking awesome. Yeah. It was good.
Yeah. So the same concept, because I was more excited to do, breaking down is one thing, and that was cool, and I was excited to be there. But then doing setups is where I really wanted to be. And so I got buddy with Mike my friend who is not an engineer more now, he got smart and got out of the business and went back to school and became he's a hard drive programmer.
All right.
He's one of them smart peoples.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, when doing setups for Mike was just because he was like, yeah, I'll take the help. Of course you take the help. But then again, he could show me something once and I pick it up and he wouldn't have to show me it again.
Right. Right.
The point where I started doing setups and he wouldn't have to check my work because I would do it how he'd want it, or do it the way that I would say do it the track record way, you know, because every studio has their own little idiosyncrasies about how they just do setups and things.
Yeah.
But I learned quick how it was the track record way.
Well, we met on, I believe it was a Goo Goo Dolls session. It was a Rob Cavallo session. Yeah. And they were tracking guitars. I had come to do some programming stuff or whatever, but they were tracking guitars, and you were on your hands and knees in the live room moving the microphones around, wearing the big old ear protectors over the headphones right in front of a fucking Marshall. And like, okay, stop. Okay, go back. Okay, remember that spot. And then, okay, remember that one. Okay, let's hear A. And you were out there for a long time. And I remember thinking like, holy shit, that guy has got it. Because anyone else would have been complaining. And you just came back in like, cool. And like, oh, I think we got to move it again. Like, great. Right back out. That's the work ethic right there. Because that's the gig.
That is the gig. I learned a lot from that gig. But then, funny enough, I kind of wondered, the engineer on that gig was Ken Allardyce, which I've lost contact with Ken. I'm not sure where he is in the world.
I have no idea. Yeah, no idea.
Yeah, I kind of think of him all the time. But then Ken learned from Bill Schnee and also Jack Joseph Puig, and I assisted Puig a lot later on in my assisting career.
Right.
At Way. But then Puig had a smart thing. He always had a pair of headphones, like cans, on the headphone cue, stereo bus, and so he would just turn the mics on and then turn the amp on where it was just going no noise, just, and then he would just put the cans on and turn them up and then just sit there and move the mic around until that's how he placed the mic. And I was like, why did Ken make me sit there? And maybe he just
Well, it takes a lot of practice to know when the white noise is sounding the way you're going to want it when you start playing guitar. But it felt a little bit like they might have been hazing you. They weren't at all, but it was brutal. And I for whatever reason, I was there that day to do something, and I sat around for hours.
The song was called Dizzy.
Yeah.
And they were trying to do an in-sync tremolo guitar part.
Exactly right. And I was the king of that at that time from doing Japanese remixes. I had this whole system with click and delays and drummer gates.
And might I say, your system was pretty fucking genius.
But it was wrong for the song. I seem to remember we got it working, and they're like, nah, I don't like that.
They found some dude, and I don't remember who the guy was. Rob knew him somehow, and I think the guy ended up like doing some analog sine wavy stuff to the guitars with the click. Like that's what ended up happening.
Right.
Long story short, but yes, that's where we met. Crazy enough. And then, dude, I had only been assisting like 8 months at that time.
Right. It was going all right, though.
Yeah, it was going all right.
Okay, so anything of note? You even talked about doing all the Death Row stuff. I mean, anything of note from track record, or do we move you on to your next studio?
I loved working at track. Well, track for me was like an amazing stepping stone, because with the exception of the Goo Goo Dolls, and then um, sorry, brain farting. Another big wig client we had coming through all the time. The clientele was pretty chill, so they didn't really expect a whole lot. So it was kind of like a good opportunity, a good place to learn.
Right.
And then most clients were amazed because they were always like, "How long have you been assisting, Darrell?" And I'm like, 10 months. And they're like, 10 months? Yeah, I got out of school back in April. Oh. So that was always a big compliment from my clients. But I will say this, man, I learned a lot of what not to do, Andrew.
Well, we don't have to be specific, but I mean, talk a little about that, because that is a huge thing. When you get the chance to work with lots and lots of different people, it's almost more important than picking up what to do.
Totally agree with you. I think you and I came from that school of, you worked with a lot of people and where you learned situations and sonic treatments of like what not to do. And I just worked in so many situations. I don't know. I can kind of contribute it to, maybe you can help me on this because we're close to the same school of starting, but it, like, there were more sessions than it felt like at that time frame in the 90s, and then the 80s were the heyday of it, apparently, from what I've been told. But then the 90s was still trickling on and on until the ultimate demise of the business as we knew it. But it was like there was a studio on every street corner, and pretty much every studio was booked.
Yeah.
So there were more engineers. Like, it was almost like there were more sessions than engineers. So producers were just pulling people. You an engineer? Yeah, I'm an engineer. And quite frankly, the majority of them were hacks. They could barely get signals to tape. And so I remember specifically after I got my signal flow chops down, so many engineers walking in. And mind you, that we're talking about a V3 and an SSL, which was a pretty common, or a VR, V3,
industry standard
operating procedure console in Los Angeles. So when an engineer would walk in there and go, hey, need help, bro? Yes, it's changeover. Oh, thank you. You know what I mean? You kind of go, here we go. So it was just this, you learned really quickly that, like, they were there just to put a mic up and make sure the needle was going this way. I'm not even sure they could hear what they were doing. So it was a lot of that, realizing how you should try to get sounds and try to get levels, and that aspect of recording, which a lot of people didn't do. It was pretty much just all safe recording.
Did you have any kind of engineer mentors though while you were there that were like, oh fuck, this guy actually knows what's up? And
Allardyce was one of them. And then, man, dude, there was another really good engineer. Although I never saw the guy track, he was a mix engineer, but he did a lot of R&B hip hop stuff. But he was really cool as well, really cool guy. And then of course another guy, the late great Dave Aaron, who was the principal engineer of Death Row Records.
Yeah.
And fucking sounds he got out of, he would just literally beat the ever living snot out of an SSL, but the thing just sang and came to life. It was crazy. So I learned a lot from him, just about how the more you dig in there, the cooler it sounds, I guess you could say.
Right. Harmonic distortion, baby.
Harmonic distortion. So just learning tricks like that. And Dave was such a sweetheart of a guy too. He really was. From memory, I think that was the kind of like the winning circle.
Right. And did you pick up any engineering gigs while you're there? People coming in and didn't have their own engineer?
A few gigs here and there, people coming in, they didn't have an engineer, and then I'd take over. But quite frankly, most of that was hip hop gigs too.
Right. Enough said.
Yeah, not my cup of tea.
No. Oh. Get comfortable, man.
So.
All right. So you move from track record. I feel like I've got the list as track record, Conway, Ocean Way, but there's a missing one. Weren't you were somewhere in between, right? Oh, so you're at the Village
for a brief moment.
Oh, right. And that was before Conway or after Conway?
After Conway.
Right. Okay. So what took you from track record to Conway? How'd that come about?
Well, so I'd been at track for about 2 years, and I was just kind of noticing this sort of like quote unquote, man, I don't want to say this in a weird bad way, but it was just like the sort of clientele that was coming through track all the time I felt like I'd learned enough from that avenue, and I wasn't going to develop unless I moved on. So it was actually Rob Cavallo that hooked me up with an interview at Conway.
Right.
And then at that time they were in needing of help, but they just weren't ready to hire somebody yet. So they finally, after months and months of just checking in with them, they finally said, okay, we need somebody now, come on over. And then I was super stoked to get over there. I learned so much at Conway, not more engineering side. I worked with so many really good engineers. Jerry Finn, I assisted him a lot. Also, Nate Kunkel was in there all the time, so I learned a lot from Nate. And there was just engineer after engineer coming in there that was just working with these high profile projects, and they were, these people were picking really good engineers to come and work with. So seeing what they do and seeing their setups and seeing how they work. But, to be honest though, it's so funny, man, because most people would be like, engineers were so busy and there was no texting and no emailing that much that back then. So it was just literally like I would call and harass engineers like, what's your setup, bro? And they're like, what do you do on drums? 47 FET, 57, 57, 451s in the overheads, or C12s in the overheads, and 421s on toms, and something on the rooms, and this on guitar and that. Oh yeah, it sounds great. Just set it up. Click. Because they were so busy on another session, they didn't have time to think about it.
Right.
There was so much of that going on. Pretty funny.
And was Peter Mokran there at that point?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course. Even though I never worked with Peter.
Right, because he kind of had his own thing going on in B for a long time, didn't he?
Long time. Yeah, he was either working with Tony or forgot the other guy's name. Been years. So sorry.
Well, for the kids watching who don't know Peter Mokran, look him up. Because he is the sound of the LA R&B scene for years.
Yes. And the sweetest guy.
Yeah. Yeah. He did a lot of Jam and Lewis stuff once they moved out. And did he do a lot? He did a lot of stuff for Babyface too, right? Or am I?
He did.
Yeah.
They did. Yep. Super sweet guy.
Yeah.
Great engineer. Oh, the since you have cats.
I have cats.
As we can see, I'll see in the background there.
Yeah.
Peter, the days of putting a mix up on a desk and, kind of mixing for 2 days because it was tape rewinding, fast forwarding, slow, cumbersome, that kind of thing, and working a moderate 10-hour day with a lunch break and a dinner break and that kind of thing. And then going home at night and then taking a snapshot of the console, because there were 2 VRs at that point, and then the J was in C, and Peter would either work in C or mostly the mix room B. Yeah, B. And then, but Peter kept coming in like at noon, sitting down, pressing play, check the mix. Stop, Tony, let's do the recall. Something's not right. So Tony checks it, does the recall. Oh, some buttons are different. Some switches are different. Okay, whatever. Logic, maybe the logic went freaky in the middle of the night. I don't know. Okay.
And maybe an assistant cut a vocal in the middle of the night.
That never happened. And then the next day came in, press play, same thing. Mix switched again, changed again, did the recall, checked it. Okay. The next morning, maybe a day or two later, I might be paraphrasing a little bit. The assistant walks in a little bit early to the session because he had some sort of phone call to make. So he figured, oh, I'll just go to the studio a bit early. The kids won't be around to bug me, blah, blah, blah. He walks in and there's the Conway cat.
Nice.
Off the desk.
Nice. I love it.
Oh, Nick.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. But I remember working in, maybe I'm getting the letters wrong, the one closest to the parking lot. That was the mix room. That was B. Okay, so Mokran was in C a lot then.
Mokran was in C or B a lot.
Right. But I remember I was doing a mix in there for Rick, who never lets anything go. And he's like, the low end changed. Like, what do you mean the low end changed? The low end changed. It was better on the earlier mixes. And I'm listening, I couldn't hear it. And he's like, look, you can hear it in my car. I'm going to send my car over. And I went into his car and listened, like, oh, shit. And we did the recall, the same. Did the recall, the same. Third time we did the recall, something in the center section came back different. No. And all of a sudden, the low end was back. And what the fuck? And that wasn't the cat. That was because that console had a lot of mods.
It was all muscle mods.
Yeah, and there was something in the center section that was like, it ruined my life for a couple of days. It was not good, but then it was fine. But what a beautiful place to work too, and just brilliant.
Yeah, there were a lot of mods, and maybe people who are accustomed or have worked or mixed on large format consoles know about this, but they did mods like whatever, when you did a cross patch it was common practice to cross patch buckets of channels just to preferred sections of the console so the engineer could reach to them, but the meters would never follow.
Yeah.
So it was kind of annoying in that aspect. But at Conway, when we did a cross patch, the meter followed. Like there was stuff like that.
Well, should we tell people who the chief tech was at that point at Conway? Jonathan Little of Little Labs. That dude, and he had been at, am I making this up? He was at A&M before that and then moved to Conway. Both of those studios still full of the custom shit he did. Custom clocks, digital clocks, custom headphone amps, custom everything.
Yeah. Yeah, we always had his clocks and his digital router. It was the first one to do a digital router, which was really smart, where you could just bang because we were printing to several formats.
Yeah.
Back mostly for backup purposes.
Yeah, you'd have two DAT machines running. You'd be burning a real-time CD.
And then usually a half inch.
Yeah.
Two DAT machines, and then in some certain situations, some clients would like the bit split mode of the which you do on the Apogee and
the Apogee to an ADAT, right? Using multi-track.
But the other format, D88.
Oh, D88, yeah.
Split.
Yeah, and that was one of the first boxes that did digital multing, because otherwise you always had to chain through, because you couldn't mult stuff, and that was bad.
Correct.
So yeah, absolutely brilliant. So I mean, what a great group of people to be at a studio with.
Correct. And so Conway was where I learned multi-track synchronization, where I learned about word clocking, video reffing, time code, time frame rates, just the enormous sessions of rolling in where there would be two 24-track machines, a 3348 machine, or in a lot of cases, two 3348 machines and a 24-track sunk together time code video ref. And in certain situations, either a beginning stages of a Pro Tools rig and or a Sonic Solutions rig to do editing.
Yeah.
And all of that sunk together, which was a daunting task. But for whatever reason, it might have been Jonathan who explained it all to me, and it sort of just clicked, and I figured it out pretty quickly. Just funny shit you just don't have to deal with today.
No, it's gone. All that is gone. And that used to be like, if you didn't understand the difference between a timing reference and a positional reference, you were fucked.
Yep. 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 And yeah, the difference between 30 frame code and 2987, blah, 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 blah. And I learned a lot of that. And it's slowed down a little bit in the past couple of years, but I would frequently get phone calls from friends like, dude, I need to lock 224 track machines in Pro Tools. How do I do that? Well, you got a links? Yeah, I do. It's turned on, but I don't know what to do. I'll show you. And at the same token, have taught assistants at studios, full-blown great assistants.
Yeah.
Lock.
Yeah. Trina Shoemaker's engineering career started because she could lock up a couple of tape machines. Basically. Yeah, a big deal. A very big deal. So let's talk about Jerry Finn for a second, because you mentioned him, and I think because, I mean, he died, it's got to be 12 years ago now?
So.
But an absolute fucking meteor.
Yeah. His records, when you listen to his records, they still sound really good.
Yeah.
Now, they sound bad then, but you're just like, oh, fuck, he was a damn good engineer. Like, he really was.
So what were a couple of the records you worked on with him?
One of the ones that I did for a long piece of time was this band called MXPX, punk rock band. Because obviously he did a lot of punk stuff, but then a fair amount of mixing on projects here and there. And quite frankly, I don't remember what some of them were. Well,
I mean, it doesn't matter. I didn't want to let his name go by without coming back to him.
Yeah. And then Jerry was just like, he was kind of like a sonic guru of like nerdy, because he was always, let's check this mic cable, like that kind of thing. But it would never go to the point to where it was just like, can we just go home now, please? It was always just like, oh no, let's do this real quick and see, does mic cable A sound better, and blah, blah, blah. And it was with him that I learned that a guitar cable, funny enough, does sound different when you switch the direction of the cabling.
Guitars are fucking weird. I mean,
yeah.
That's it. And I think it's when people extrapolate that to speaker wire and like, no, there's a big difference between guitar level and impedance and speaker level and impedance. Right. But yeah, guitar cables, it's hard to overstate how much they affect the sound.
Yes. Yeah. And like I said, literally, you get a guitar sound, press chord, change to chord. Okay, hold on. Just ends from zing. Oh my God, that's way brighter.
Crazy.
Weird.
Yeah. So I mean, he was onto all of that, but he wasn't bogging down sessions with it.
No, because it was literally in that aspect of just like, switch the guitar ends real quick. Let's see. Oh, cool. Let's move on. Great.
Right.
No, and then learning from him, like he was doing the whole multi-staging / running 4 or 5 amps at one, blending them down to a mono track. Usually going through like a Varimu, a Manley Varimu, and or some maybe it's a Pultec or something like that. Sometimes just for a little cue on the back end, where I kind of learned the art of just grab a couple amps and blend them together to get this ginormous sound, which is still very much the case to this day. And funny enough, I don't do that a lot these days. My clientele doesn't really, it doesn't fit the...
No, that's a thing. That's a really specific production thing, I think.
Correct. Yeah,
And
totally.
it's not, yeah, it's not what you're doing. It's not what you're doing. But wait, I feel like we've skipped over something, and I don't remember which studio this was at, because you did a session with someone from Dukes of Hazzard, and we got to talk about that.
Yeah, that's the question of like, someone asked me the other day. Oh, my niece asked me the other day. She's like, "Do you ever get starstruck?" Because I got her. So I don't have any legitimate nieces. Obviously, I'm an only child. But my buddy Paul, my Navy buddy Paul, I like his daughter to me is my niece, and then my wife has nieces, and they're like nieces to me, and I treat them like nieces. But they're all big music fans, and so I make sure I buy them tickets for various big artists that come through that they're fans of, and they can't believe that their uncle works with them in the studio. But Kendrick was like, "Do you get starstruck? Do you get nervous?" I was like, "No, not really. Sometimes, not really though." She's like, "Well, okay, then who?" John Schneider. Who? Dukes of Hazzard. Luke Duke walked in the fucking studio, shook it. I mean, dude, I got my ass spanked one night because for whatever reason, my mom had a wild hair up her ass that she decided that it was bedtime for me. And it wasn't bedtime. It was a Friday night and Dukes of Hazzard were on, Mom.
Wow.
Yeah. I need to like call my mom up after this. Go, you know what? That was bullshit, Mom.
All right, just don't blame it on me. I was talking to my friend Andrew, and he said, "No, no, 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 no." It is funny like that. Like, I mean, I remember when I did a song for the SpongeBob soundtrack, and SpongeBob came to the house.
Is that guy cool or?
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, Kenny.
I Googled it. I found out that he does Gary as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But having Tom Kenny come over to the house, it was also the first time my kids thought I was cool.
Oh.
You know, they couldn't have given a shit about all the musicians. But that's the thing. Like, I think we get used to, it's not only, okay, we're used to working musicians, but like part of being good in the studio is to not be starstruck, is to treat them like normal people because they're there to work. And you convince yourself of that. I mean, obviously, I think we've both been nervous when certain people come in, but it's either certain producers or people who are not in the music business that will freak me out.
True.
So what's the deal with your Dukes of Hazzard session, man?
So yeah, we all know. I think John Schneider's a like country Americana, more country musician, and he just booked a tracking gig at Conway on a Saturday, and it was just a one song thing. The band was amazing players, from what I understand, and literally came in. I did a setup, and then the engineer was. I mean, I hope I'm not crossing my wires, but I honestly want to say it was Tommy Vicari was engineering.
Let's say it's Tommy Vicari.
Yeah, Tommy was the sweetest person ever, and also a badass at what he does.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and I don't remember who the producer was. It was just too freaking long ago, but literally cut the song and then with the band in like a couple of hours, and then they did a couple of quick overdubs, guitar overdubs. And then John had no intention of, even though he was doing a scratch vocal, he wanted to sing it one more time just for the hell of it. But apparently they were going back to his studio or the producer's studio just to sit down and hone in on the vocals separately. And so it was the chillest thing. But then I did talk to John Schneider for a couple of minutes because he rolled up in a Charger.
Nice.
And then I was like, dude, John, I can't believe you're driving a Charger. And he was like, oh, dude, yeah, I'm from the show, obviously. A massive fan of the car. I own 3 of them, and then I collect, restore, and then sell them to people who, not for profit, mind you, for just people who to keep the brand around. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. So yeah, because you couldn't miss him when he pulled in.
I'll bet. He didn't have a rebel flag on it though.
No.
Good,
no.
good. All right.
No, it wasn't like that. No.
A little more LA than that. Man. All right. So what moves you to the Village from Conway?
I'd worked at Conway for almost a year. Then um, the studio manager left, and then she went to Conway, and the new studio manager um, came in, and things were just a little bit like a little different. So, and then I kept talking to the old studio manager. She was over at the Village, and so she offered me a job, and I accepted it. So I went to the Village,
Right.
and I think I only worked there for 7 or 8 months, and
Right.
then yeah, um, I did some cool sessions at the Village. Um, um, it was interesting to work there in the sense of the history that place was. Didn't care for the drive. That sucked. I lived in the valley and then working in Santa Monica.
Yeah, no, that's brutal.
It was brutal. um, but then again, I really enjoyed working in the 8028.
Yeah.
That room's, I worked in there a couple of years ago with Beck for like a week, and I was really shocked because obviously my sense of sonics, what I like and what I don't like, have matured greatly since my days of assisting still. But working in that room as a more of a seasoned, I guess, seasoned engineer going in there, I was like, oh my God, this room does sound good. And the console sounds really good too. So I was just like, oh shit. So, and I imagine that's why uh, Ruben liked it too.
Yeah.
I know he worked in there a lot, but funny enough, he was only in there once or twice, maybe once when I was.
Yeah, I think he used that room a lot more before then. You know, he
Yeah.
kind of went over to East West and stuff. So, it was,
Yeah.
well, Ocean Way, cello.
Yellow then.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I mean, you got anything in particular? Any sessions? You know, you can't say, "Oh, we were cool sessions," and then you just blow it off. I mean, come on, man.
um, I worked with Brian Setzer
Right.
there during that thing, which it was kind of interesting meeting him. He's an odd cat, but cool, but odd. And I was a fan of the Brian Setzer Orchestra and all that stuff. And then so it was interesting meeting him and working with him. Um, I'll say that, okay, let's just segue into, because this is this perfect setup to get from Village to Ocean Way. Maybe I'll just keep the name of the artist out of it for political reasons, for whatever. But so there was an artist that kept coming back to the studio because they were trying to quote unquote rework a song for a single. And they'd book a day, we'd work a day, they'd add another day, work another day, 2 days, then they would go away and then they'd come back. Like this just went on for like 2 weeks or something. It was pretty crazy. Why they kept sort of rehashing this one particular song and trying to force it to be a single when I don't know if it was a single, but I'm not an A&R guy, so what do I know? Then I left the Village and got a job at Ocean Way. I get put on as a third because Ocean Way, for those of you who may not seen pictures, is such an entity unto itself, especially because of the two consoles. The Focusrite is extremely different, and then
It's the Dalcon, right?
Was really different console than anything I'd ever worked on in my career. So used to being on inline format consoles, with the exception of that 8028, but even the 8028 was a little bit more streamlined and modernized in the patch bay than what the Dalcon was. So so thirding over there, and then once again, kind of figuring out the tricks and trades of like, hey, this is how we set up a session and do a session. Okay, cool. So I'm thirding on this session, and then I can't remember if I knew what was going on, but then lo and behold, the producer walks in on the same gig, and he looks at me and goes, "Wait a minute, why are you here?" And I was like, "Oh, I just left the village, and the job opportunity came up over here, so I took it." And he was like, "Good for you," as in, "Good job."
Right. So, all right, well, let's talk about this for a second. So, was JJP, he was in A at that point, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so for the history is that back in the day, Ocean Way was two buildings. It was the Ocean Way building and the United building, and then it split and it became Ocean Way and Cello, and then Cello is turned into East West. And Ocean Way is now back being called United, but that building was always Ocean Way. That never really changed in there. So you got the wraparound gigantic Focusrite in A in the front room, and then the Dalcon, which was basically a hand-wired console that had just level, send, pan. That was it. And then there were API EQs. Did it have tone controls as well?
It was buses.
Right.
It was the large fader always went to the bus matrix, but the bus matrix also housed the stereo bus,
Right.
like an old 8078 would.
Yeah.
But however, there was EQ on the channel, but it was a 3-band, very narrow Q, but you would select each band. You could put each band in or out.
Right.
It was a very narrow Q. It was more, I mean, I always use it as like, oh, it was a little bit too much mud. You could get in there in the 200 range and kind of click it out and thin it out, or something a little bit in the 3K range and just kind of notch it out. I never really boosted with it. I'd always use it as I'm trying to get rid of something frequency on the console.
Right.
But yes.
And then there's a wall of API 550 A's.
Which were on the inserts
of
the hardware. Did I just say fucking hardware insert?
Yeah. That's all there was.
Yeah, the APIs were on the inserts of the console, but there was an actual soft switch.
Yeah.
To if they weren't in, they weren't going through the circuit at all. If you push the button, it went through the circuit.
Right. So like super clean signal path. And it's funny because I did several sessions in there, never used the EQ on the Dalcon, which is why I've forgotten it even had it.
Yeah.
So it was just for routing. But amazing live rooms in both rooms, very, very different live rooms as well.
Yeah.
That is one of the earlier instances of a drumbrella in B, gigantic lowering thing over the drums, and a very iconic room. I mean, you know, anybody can go look up what was done there. But let me ask you a question here. So we're, 4 years into your LA stint? 3? So only 3. Okay. At any point when you were moving from one studio to another, did you think, is now the time that I should just be an engineer? Or did you know, like, you weren't quite ready yet and you wanted to keep doing this?
Yeah, I felt like I wasn't quite ready yet. I remember specifically trying to have the conversation in my head about being an engineer. I just didn't feel like I was confident enough quite yet. However, gigs will roll through and I would engineer here or there. And then it would seem like this situation of like, oh, well, you know, you were cool and da-da-da. And I was kind of like, I was hoping for the opportunity that somebody would just slurp me up and become, you know, hey, you're my engineer. Sweet. And then I did have a couple of instances where R&B guys wanted to use me as but I didn't want to go down the R&B career path. I really just wanted to stay in rock. And so I just kept assisting.
It shows willpower though, because man, I mean, any engineering gig is so tempting when you're assisting.
Yeah,
so,
you know, like obviously it's a big, huge pay bump. You know, you go from making, I don't know what, $15 an hour to $50 an hour or whatever it was, you know, but then again, it's just like, well, that's not what I want to do. And then even to the point to where when I started assisting at Ocean Way, the assistant that was currently in with JJP was leaving, and I threw my name in the hat, but they hired somebody else, which worked out for my advantage. Um, um, because I kind of wanted to go in there and learn from that dude. And two, that like I was like, oh man, I could just go in there and work my ass off and blah blah blah. But they picked somebody else, and then I just, I wasn't there that long, and then history happened.
Well, all right. So we're at this point. We're going to talk about it. You talk about getting slurped up, and you got slurped up by the guy that pretty much everybody who does what we do and likes rock wants to be slurped up by. So let's spend the next 4 hours talking about Nigel Godrich.
Nigel, you online? What if he's online? Yeah. So it was around, I think it was October of 2001. And it was pretty, just a sidetrack real quick. I don't know if you remember, Andrew, but man, the summer of 2000 for engineers was brutal. Everybody and their brother and their brother's band and their brother's baby band went out on the road and played some festival in some part of the world for months on end. Like, it was insane. We were dead. And I was broke. So I was kind of thinking, like, man, am I going to make it through this? And I barely made it through it. Like, barely. Just didn't have any work. It was insanity. And then, of course, then summer ended, and then bands started coming back into town, and then the business picked up. But then finally, Kelly was just like the studio manager time. She was like, Darrell, I got it might have been a 6-week gig or something. I got a 6-week gig for you coming up in October. I'm like, oh, thank God. 6 weeks of work. Thank God. Who's the band? We had this amazing band called Travis. Who's Travis? You don't know who Travis is? Like, she was really mad at me.
Of course, there's no Spotify or YouTube at this point, really.
Pretty much, yeah. So, anywho, it was a crazy situation. These bunch of Scottish guys roll in the studio with their gear, and then this English producer that I didn't know, and I might have known a song or two of Radiohead, but I wasn't a Radiohead fan. Like, I just didn't know about them.
And this is between the Benz and OK Computer, is that right?
This is Kid A is about to come out.
Oh, okay, so this is post OK Computer, right? Okay.
Yeah, Kid A is just about to drop. Funny enough. Of course, I knew Creep, which is still an incredible song when it comes on. And then, thank God, Tom started playing it again live years ago, because it has to be played live.
Can I just interrupt you just very quickly? I think it was one of the first times they'd started playing it again was a gig at the Hollywood Bowl that I was lucky enough to go to. And they wind up for the chorus, and Johnny uncharacteristically gets on top of an amp or something to jump off and do the... I don't remember if he jumped from something, but it was like a big moment, and his guitar wasn't working. And the lights went, and there's nothing. And the good thing was they all laughed quite heartily while they continued the song without the big chunk-unks. But a very exciting moment.
The first time they played it is when they headlined Coachella. In years. The crowd went absolute berserk when they heard the the chordal riff just in the verse. Like, they just went fucking ballistic. And then of course when the chin chin, like, oh dude, so good.
Yeah.
So yeah, so and then it was interesting too because Nigel rolled in, and then he was staying at a hotel, and so Kelly got his number, and I called him several times, but I couldn't get a hold of him, and I was kind of freaking out. Nobody had a setup for me. Nobody had any information for me. I didn't know if it was 24 track or 48 track. Like, I just didn't know nothing. And then Nigel just rolls in casually at like 11 o'clock or noon or whatever it was on a Monday morning. And I just kind of go, hey man, I'm so sorry. I couldn't get a hold of you. Like, I don't know what the fuck's going on here. He's like, ah, it's okay. We'll figure it out. Really? He's like, yeah, mate, it's fine. Okay. What's the deal? Oh yeah, well, let's do 24 track and make sure there's a 1/2-inch machine too. And it's like, what kind of tape? What do you got? Well, I know there's GP9 up there. Sure. Level? What do you like to do? +6, 185? Yeah, great. That's what it was. And then the band rolls in, cartage drops. He was like, oh yeah, let's get things set. So that we set the band, like all their backline and amps and shit, and Franny's here and Dougie's here and drums over here and blah blah blah. And then he goes, and then I finally you have a mic list for me, Nige? And he's like, oh well, hold on. Well, let's do. And he just goes, okay, 47 FET, snare top and bottom, 57, 47 tube mono overhead, and 421s on the tops. Another story's about to start too. I go, okay. And then 87s on the guitars, and then 47 tube on the bass amp. DI? No DI. And then, 47 on Franny's vocal. Okay. We're going to go to lunch. See you in a couple hours. Okay. So then I just start setting it up, get a runner in there to help me out, setting up, get it up, well, line check, single check, get the tape machine, blah, blah. They come back. I can't remember if we got sounds or we started recording that night or we started the next day. I don't remember. It's just the most casual fucking thing that I'd ever seen. And I never seen that because most people run in there and it's just like, when it's time is money, is time, money. You know, and I don't know if it's necessarily that case or people are just so excited to be in the studio. So it's like, come on, can we record yet? Can we record yet? But they were just so casual about the whole process and concept. So, and then, and then we started recording. But to a story I like to tell because it comes up repeatedly. The great Fab DuPont texted me 2 weeks ago saying he had a gig coming up, and it's one of the drum sounds inspirations was Sea Change, which is Nigel's very typical setup, just happens to be Mr. James Gatson beating the skins. And then, so I know exactly what the setup was, with the exception of, I can't remember if Nigel told me to put 421s on the toms or he told me just put up whatever. But for whatever reason he said that, well, I just went with what Alan Sides does, which is C12As on the toms. I mean, why wouldn't you put C12As on the toms?
If you got
There's
them.
20 of them in there. So I put C12As on the toms. Nigel comes in to place, just to move the mics closer where he likes them. And he looks at me like, Des, C12As? And I go, oh, I'm so sorry. What did you want 421s? He's like, yeah, that's what I asked for. I think he did say 421s, and I brain farted. And he goes, yeah, I did want 421s. I was like, oh, I can switch it. No, I'm so sorry. I went to the bad place and changed your mic and blah, blah, blah. He was like, oh, well, let me hear it first. And I'm like, you sure? I can totally change it. I do not mind. He was like, no, let me hear it. And I swear to God, he pushed the faders up and he doom, 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 doom. And he went, what? So he was like, that was the greatest mistake I've ever heard in my life. So from there on out, it was always C12As on the toms.
Nice. Well done, sir.
Well done, sir. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Especially with like Neil plays a lot like Joey Waronker, he's very, very light hitter. He does not play hard. So it's cymbal bleed isn't that big of a deal and da 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 da.
Right.
Yeah. So then we started cutting the record, and I can't remember exclusively, but I did remember like sitting there watching Nigel and listening to Nigel get sounds. He was pushing the fader up and listening for a second, and then going over to the API EQ and just going, and then boom, it would sound like the best kick drum you've ever heard, and then the snare. Okay. Like, and as from an American engineer standpoint, where I had heard time and time again from producers who were just telling their engineers to record things, just get it to tape, because certain people were going to process the hell out of it on their end anyways.
Right.
Didn't want to mess that sonic highway of whatever. They didn't want to mess that up. So just literally make sure the needle's moving and it's not distorting. And so the first time I'd worked with an engineer and a producer who was just getting these amazing sounds, and it was sounding done, like from the beginning tracking, like just sonically, it was like in your face, and it was beautiful, and there was tone and airy and open, and nothing was dark and dingy. And it was just like, whoa, that's how you're supposed to do it. Like it, literally a light bulb went off. Like,
wow.
Oh, so the EQ goes to 12 for a reason, or 15. And that was a big turning point in my career where I just realized, like, wow, man, I don't want to be that guy who just kind of comes in and pushes the faders up and looks like he's a deer in headlights, and it just sounds like shit, and it's uninspiring. And so we started recording, and then like he let me tape op a lot, and he also enjoyed my system of organization, which he said a lot of people didn't do that he worked with before, as far as getting take numbers and things like that per. I always took notes and take numbers, you know, take 1, 0, 0, count off 5 seconds, intro 8 seconds, verse 1, 12 seconds, da da da, take 1, take 2. I always did that because, and then Jerry Finn even commented on me doing that too, because when it came time to put a comp together, they knew exactly where, you know, verse 1's from take 2 and da da da. They just knew where to go in the reel instead of searching for it for whatever long it take. And so Nigel was really thrilled by that. And then he realized quickly, like, he was just like, oh, that verse was good. And I'd write a note, da, da, da. And then that verse was good. Okay, write a note, da, da, da. And then, but then at the end of it, he would go, Darrell, I know the comp. From take 8, verse 2, da, 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 take 10, chorus 2, all the way out. But let's listen to take 10, let's take 12 of the outro, just real quick, because that might have been better. And so, and I had these notes just handy, rah, rah, rah. And so he was always really impressed by that. And so that went on for 6 weeks. Then they left. And the whole point was they were supposed to go back to England and just keep making the record in England. But then the weather was really terrible and crap, and they were missing LA and the sunshine. So they talked their label into letting them come back to LA and finish the record here. And like, I think they came back in February or March or something like that. And so, and then when they came back and did the rest of the record and recorded and mixed it all in Studio B, it was like Nigel was like, Darrell, I've got to bring Radiohead here. I've got to. I mean, I know we just finished a record. Because I can't remember. I feel like it was that time frame, the second round, maybe in the spring of, and I might have my dates wrong. The spring, so that would have been spring of 2001 when Kid A came out.
Right. Could be.
Yeah. Because it went number 1, and like a lot of people from the label were coming by from Capitol. Nothing to do with Travis, for Radiohead coming by and saying hello to Nigel.
Right.
Congrats, number 1, and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it was all that, and then kind of worked on the entire record, and then we finished it, and Nigel went home, and then the album came out, and it was kind of a cool experience to be a part of. But then, and then for Nigel, it was, and I don't remember the time frame, quite honestly. I guess I'd have to Google it, but it wasn't that long after that that came back and worked with Beck. We started Sea Change, so, which was cool.
So real quick though, going back to the Travis record. So this is the Invisible Band,
Yeah,
right? Okay, because the Man Who was a second. Yeah. Okay.
big one.
What was the mixing process I mean, because from everything I've heard about Nigel, sometimes the mixes are what happens at the end of the day while you're cutting. And so was Travis more of a kind of traditional, like, hey, we're done tracking, let's mix the record? Or was it?
Yeah, he wanted to spend some time mixing it. And quite honestly, mixing it to him was just more about, like the songs were there. So, a little EQ here or there just to clean something up or brighten something up. But it was more about him. He wanted to do some, a lot of writing for performance part wise, coming in and out of the song, poking in and out. So that was his quote unquote mixing. So it really didn't take him long to mix a song. I probably did 2 or 3 songs a day.
And no automation in there, right? Or am I?
No.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, yeah. Right. Okay. I'm remembering now.
Yeah.
It often wasn't working, but it was there.
Yes, correct. Yeah, because I remember specifically he told the band, like, hey guys, just go away, go hike, go to the beach, leave me alone. I just want to, and then we can come back and play everything down for everybody and see if there's points to mention or talk about or blah, blah, blah. So it's pretty much just Nigel and I sitting in there while he was mixing. So, but yeah, I mean, but as far as like the sounds and the tones, yeah, they were already there. It was literally a little stereo bus compression and a little bit of cleanup work.
Right.
Sonically. Yeah.
Nice. So Beck, because that's the beginning of another whole huge chapter of your
career.
Yeah. Your career. But this is still very much working at Ocean Way, on a record with Nigel producing. I'll stop talking and you'll start.
Yeah, we started Sea Change. And then being in the situation of working with guys like Justin Metal Johnson on bass, Smokey Hermel on guitar, Roger Manning on keys and piano, and such and such. And obviously Beck singing and playing guitar. And then Joey Warnker played on a couple of songs, but then he was actually in REM at that time. So he was on the gig for me a week or 2, if I remember correctly. And then he went out on the road with REM. And so then Gatson took over.
Sorry, who did?
James Gatson.
Oh, right, yeah.
Took over the duties of that. And that wasn't my first time working with James, but that was my kind of like realization of, call me crazy or whatever, I'll say it out loud, but man, that was my first time of realizing what a fucking animal James is. Like, Jesus, just because it's the weirdest thing when you sit down at his kit.
Yeah.
It has the same drum heads. The drum heads are older than you and I.
Yeah. They're like craters.
Yeah. When when a regular human being sits down at his kit and plays it, it sounds like absolute dog shit. But then James walks in, and mind you, he's not hitting hard. It's not like he's beating the drum into submission to emanate tone. It's just his touch. And it's just like, what is going on? It's just insanity. Because it wasn't that gig, but it was another Beck gig. And I just remember like looking at his, and mind you, I I've done several records with Joey Warnker, as Joey being the producer of certain things. And I learned so much from Joey being a drummer on a gig, but being a producer on a gig where like drum tuning and placement and tones and chips and tricks to get studio drums to sound insane, where then learning all that from Joey going, oh, wow, that's how you do that. Oh, that's how you do that. Oh, that's how you, whoa, holy cow, this is cool. Da, 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 da. To now, to then actually working with James and then going in there as like a, you know, like a frustrated drum tech and then hitting his toms going, oh my God, what is going on in here? But then 2 seconds later, he walked in and started hitting them. And it was just like a completely different, like did you just swap out all the toms in there? That's not what I heard when I hit him. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. I tracked him once and he was threatening to change a head on one of the toms. And like these heads, they're seriously like the heads that came with the drums in the 70s. They are that old. We're not exaggerating. And he was saying, oh man, I'll get my drum tech to do it. Like, first of all, are you fucking kidding me? And then I called up and said like, hey, James is saying he wants to swap a head on the rack tom. And his cartridge guy was also his drum tech at that point. And he's like, I don't have any heads for that. That's never come up, ever. Like, that's not going to happen. So I went back and told James, like, hey, man, there are no heads. He's like, okay, cool, I'll play this one. Like, all right. But insane. Yeah, it's, I think for people, I'm hoping that everybody watching this knows who James Gadsden is. But if you want to see the genius of James Gadsden in a really like easy to see way, watch. There are a couple performances with Bill Withers on the Old Grey Whistle Test where there's a lot of James Gadsden, and it's fucking insane. The groove is just
the grooviest, literally.
Yeah. Amazing. So what a great opportunity, because obviously that band is incredible, and then to get James is the icing on the cake.
Yes. Yeah.
With that, and I mean, as great a drummer as Joey is, they're pretty different.
Yeah, and you know, and I've had conversations with Joey about it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm a different drummer, and that's fine. Just, you know."
But what did that mean for the record? Like, what was Nigel and Beck's take on how to organize that record, having those two drummers? Was it ever a conscious thing, or you just sort of got through as much as you could with Joey until he split, then James came in, or were there like, these are the Joey tunes, this is the James stuff?
I can't speak freely, and because I don't remember if I was around for that conversation. I mean, so it might have been just cutting. Well, I'll say this, that it might have been a situation where let's just get what we can get when Joey's here, and then when he has to split, we'll go on.
We'll make do with James Gadsden.
We're gonna make it. Yeah, but I don't know if I like. Well, the beginning track on Sea Change is.
I'm gonna let you look it up because I'll get it wrong.
Oh, is it really a Dell 30?
Is that all you can see on your computer? That's it?
Yeah, because there's some meme walking around with like a really older woman in her 80s, and it says a Dell 85 or something like that. It's just the running joke. She just kept the dream alive.
Yeah, of course, she's not actually 30 anymore, so it's a little weird.
How old is she?
I thought she was 34, 35 or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know.
I could be making that up, though. What the hell do I
know? Yeah. Oh.
But anyway, we're not here to talk about Adele.
So because like the opening track. Oh, no. Oh, no. I'm not like I said, I'm not good at dates and things like that, but for whatever freaking reason, I remember distinctively, like the first song we cut on the record was called It's All in Your Mind. And just the way that song starts out with, and mind you, there's no click track. That's just the band feeling it out as slow as they freaking can, but they can do that. That's what makes like certain players that I know, like these unique animals of like just a segue for 5-10 seconds, whatever it is. It's like the Wrecking Crew here, what Beck calls himself, the Wrecking Crew, which is Joey, Justin, and Roger and Smokey, can do things that no other fucking musician could do. And I'm saying that from a pure experience point of view, where I've seen it firsthand multiple times. Like, these people can't do that shit that they do with this like free-formed, slow as balls 55 BPM thing, and still feel like they're just in perfect synchronization, and it's not swaying around, moving. And then funny enough, I've had multiple conversations with it. There's a couple guys that I work with in Nashville who can do the same thing. And I'm just like, okay, so basically there's 5 guys in the world that I know that can do that. Like, hey, do this. All right. And anybody else would be like, filling all over themselves. But it's instances like that where I just don't think, like, not to say that James couldn't do it, but I don't, in my mind, I'm kind of like trying to picture, you can't, the first Batman is Michael Keaton. Like, you can't, like, who else would it was supposed, who was the runner-up supposed to be? And you're like, it doesn't make any sense to me now. Like, that kind of situation. So, yeah, I literally, because I do remember, I think Joey was only around for a week or something like that. So we cut what we could with him, and because we cut a song a day, basically. And that's how Nigel likes to work. He likes to start a song, work on it for a day or 2, 3 days, maybe, until it's like feeling cooked, and then make a rough, put it to bed, start a new tune, move on.
That's including overdubs.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah,
singing, like, get it to a point to where it sounds done. And then move on to something else. And then funny enough, the Foo Fighters work that way as well. Usually, sometimes there's the monkey wrench thrown in there, but that's no pun, literally no pun intended on
that. Well played, sir.
I didn't even mean to say that.
That's all right. So let's continue on the Nigel train. I mean, we're skipping over some other records you worked on in between, whatever, but
what did I do? I don't remember.
Well, I don't know. There's was the Elton John thing? What was that?
Oh, One Day thing, tracking.
Right.
Got it correct.
Okay. There's a Nate Dogg record right around then.
Oh, Nate Dogg, yeah, man, because that was kind of pretty close to before he unfortunately passed away. And I enjoyed working with Nate. He's pretty chill. He's cool. He was a cool guy. He really was. He was an interesting cat, but it was always funny watching him do his thing. I've got ho-ohs. I mean, who doesn't know that hook? So watching Nate do his thing was pretty interesting. Yeah.
Right. There's a Wallflowers record in there.
That was the Village to Ocean Way session.
Ah, right. That's the one. Yeah, that record took a while. Well, look, let's just continue on the Nigel thing, because this is your career trajectory at that point, and it's got so many people coming in and out that are now part of your world. And
we could backtrack for a minute, because I did forget one point. Sorry. So my first one of the first the Wallflowers gig was the first thing that I did at Ocean Way, continuing on from the Village, funny enough. But the first like big crazy gig I did was a live to 2-track jazz thing, because that room was known as, let me clarify for the audience, that Studio B at Ocean Way was known as the jazz room in LA. If the jazz guys, because obviously not a lot of money in jazz music, so tons of live to 2-track albums were done in that room, just jazz gigs, because they could just set up in the round and go to town. And the console was super clean and punchy and beautiful and open sounding. It kind of had a color, but it wasn't colored like, you know, like a Neve is colored or an API is colored. So they loved that just clear, open nature. Well, so and so the days of Sony SACD were coming up online. So Sony wrote the bill for a jazz pianist to come to LA, and it was, the album's called Mr. Sasagi and his LA All Stars. It was like the creme de la creme of studio musicians coming in, live to 2-track. We did roll multi-track because it did get mixed in surround sound for SACD, but what was released to the public stereo was the live to 2-track stuff. And we cut it on 1/2 inch, and we cut it on like 2-track version of SACD, which is was a hard drive version. But watching that go down was just fucking nuts.
And who was engineering that?
Alan Sides.
That was Alan, right?
Yeah, he was the. Alan had his thing, but man, when you got that guy behind a console in a high pressure situation, he was like, somebody get me a Diet Coke.
Buddy. Yeah.
Like, really? You're not freaking out? It's fine. Yeah, it was like Vinny Colaiuta on drums, several bass players, Abe Senior,
right,
electric, and then there was another, David Carpenter might have been his name. He was a massive upright bass shredder. I think that's all he played was upright for sessions.
Right.
Couple of different guitar players. One of them is escaping my name. And then obviously the Mr. Sasagi was the pianist or jazz pianist. And then Andrew, do you remember who is the lead singer of Mr. Mister? Do you remember his name?
Oh God, I'm not going to come up with that name. Okay. That's not going to happen.
Sang vocals on 1 or 2 songs. So there was only 1 or 2 songs that had actual a lead vocal. A couple songs had BVs. And then a horn section, a woodwind section, Alex Acuna playing percussion.
Oh, Mark says Richard Page.
Thank you, sir. That guy, holy shit, what an incredible singer. Just walked in the studio and me. Okay, let's go. And then nailed it. I could sing. So it was just this massive setup. It took us 2 days to set it up.
Wow.
And because it's such a big setup, funny enough, I was the third. And then I think it was Greg, who was the assistant. But I mean, we were both working our tails off to get this thing up and running and going. But it was just insane to watch this go a whole down, especially for my career of being in 3 years of my career, just working in this quote unquote, like controlled environment of like, oh, stop, something's wrong. We gotta fix this thing. Oh, we're gonna take 5, that kind of thing. No, it was just like,
right.
Counter up. They're rolling. Yep. So it was pretty, it was insane. It was insane. It was nuts. It was nuts to see. Cause I'd heard the term live to 2-track. I'd done my share of jazz gigs, quote unquote, but it was also multi-track, just live multi-track, make a mistake, fix it, and then they go somewhere else and mix.
Right.
So did a bunch of those gigs at Ocean Way. Quite a few. And they were fun because they were quick. Music was cool. The players were great. The cool guy. Everybody was cool. And it was always, funny enough, pretty chill. Just but that session specifically, I remember going, what is going on here? This can't be true.
And Alan is, as you say, completely unflappable. Just
And then hearing at that time SACD, which was like, holy shit, what an incredible format that was. Really sad that it didn't.
it's Sony, man. Betamax, they can't win.
No. Yeah, because I've always wondered. I was always thinking that the sonic quality of SACD was just so far superior to what PCM is, and that maybe it's going to take over. But
Funny that MP3s did instead.
we went the other way.
Yeah, timing was all wrong for that.
Yep. Timing was horrible. Oh, is that Mark chatting us?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Yeah, where were we before I was so rudely interrupted by myself?
We're just talking other gigs you did sort of around the Nigel time, because now we're going to take the Nigel train.
Back to the Nigel train. Woo-woo.
It's a train a lot of people would like to get on. I mean, I remember when because I can't remember what the deal was. Why did I even hear that you were in with Radiohead? I mean, I think it was the kind of thing where like people knew, and it was like, oh fucking hell, man, that's so awesome. Like big deal. So let's talk about that.
Well, that was a pretty mind-blowing experience, first of all.
So you'd already done 2 full records or more with Nigel at that point.
Yeah, both to the Travis and Beck.
Yeah.
And then funny enough, just to backtrack for a minute, my favorite record, and did I put it on my list?
I don't know.
Mutations.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
For the people that don't know anything about that record, that was Nigel and Beck. And then I asked Nigel, I was like, how did you end up doing that record? And he's like, oh, well, Beck called me, and I was a little confused because I was listening to Odelay, and I'm like, why does he want to work with me? Not knowing that he wanted to do this like kind of like folky kind of Americana acoustic record. And then they cut that album in 15 days, recorded and mixed, all in B. Same deal. Do a song, overdub, finish it, mix it, do another song.
Right.
So, and to listen to that record, and realizing that it was cut in such a quick time. The band was super rehearsed. I will give them that. Like the songs were written, everything was dialed in as far as parts, but it was still a lot of, just to record something that masterful in that amount of time, especially which I put on the last song, which is Diamond Static Bollocks. Oh no, I didn't put the song on.
No, it didn't make it on. Just the only Beck song on there is "Ship in a Bottle."
That's an amazing one. But the last song is pretty crazy because it's a bunch of tape loop stuff. So, which I'd never seen or heard before. I didn't know that existed.
Really? You hadn't done the Tomorrow Never Knows deep dive?
Not at that time frame. Yeah. Dude, I just found out that at Africa, Toto.
Yep. 2-inch tape loop. Fucking Al Schmidt,
Because they were next door to the Bee Gees doing tape loops in Miami. Well, that's a cool idea. But in my mind, I'm always like, why would you do that? You had like the greatest drummer in the world in your band. But I guess he was cool with it. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. They were into it. And I think it's funny because it's to me, it always feels like sort of the weird alternate universe version of what was going on a lot of the reggae records in Jamaica, where they would jam the verse for hours. And the producer would go, oh, there it was. And they'd kind of mark it. like the band would be playing, and these are all great musicians, and the band would play, and then all of a sudden it would just fucking lock. Like, all right, that's that groove. And then move on to the chorus groove and play and play and play and play. And I can't remember specifics of like which producers were doing this. Just remember reading about it years ago, and the concept stuck with me, but not the specifics at all. But that was for some of the records getting made there, the live band records. That's how they would do it. So it would have been fine to just play the song down. It probably would have been great, but it wouldn't have just been the fucking magic.
Think that Marley did that stuff as well?
I don't know. I don't think so. And I'm
Bob Marley tune came on, and I'm not that big of a reggae fan, so to speak. Like, go out of my way and research all the reggaes. But obviously, Bob Marley is like he's the face of reggae music. Okay, and then a song came on that I've heard 1,000 times, but I just was driving down the road analyzing the shit out of it, like the groove of it, just going, damn. Man, his band was so good.
So good.
And it's just all about that bass just having this insane tonality that I couldn't get if I tried my hardest. I don't know how.
I don't know. Again, lots of stories of all these engineers in Jamaica who would like ride the bias on the machines to get tones. Because they didn't have a huge amount of outboard gear. There weren't like big consoles. And so they're working in sort of kind of basic studios, but with tape machines. So, distort it a little bit. Well, take the bias down a little and it won't stick as well, but you'll get more distortion. And yeah, just because those are the tools. I mean, you got bass and treble on the fucking tape machine. Why wouldn't you use it?
Yeah.
Right?
It's just so cool how your mindset changes when you don't have 20 Pultecs in the rack. You just go, well, how can I do it a different way?
Well, and watching Nigel like go for it sonically, because of course you would. Like when you see it, it's so obvious that like, well, why would the band want to play to a bunch of like okay sounding tracks?
But Andrew, as your experience is coming up in Engineers LA, wouldn't you agree that was like that was standard operating procedures where producers were just so afraid of sonically shaping the basic tracking to be anything that was sort of quote unquote, musical and sonically listenable for the artist to be inspired?
Yeah. I mean, I think I was lucky that I worked with a lot of on a lot of productions where it was almost like hybrid with some of the hip hop scene, or like there was always programming and things, and programming would obviously always be sonically really shaped. Yeah. And so then working on like the Michael Jackson record with Bruce Swedien, where I mean the guy looks as though he's doing absolutely nothing, but those sounds don't need to be changed later. Like they are what they are. They're just captured, but they're captured so fucking well that you don't have to do anything later. But yeah, I didn't get to work with a lot of engineers who just fucking turned knobs and went for it.
I imagine it was the same with Al Schmidt. He
does nothing. His balance is just like, it's unbelievable. But yeah, he does. Well, famously he would say, I don't use EQ or compression. And he's not lying. There's zero EQ and zero compression on the way in. He's got 2 limiters when he's mixing, one for the vocal, one for the bass. You track upright bass through a limiter sometimes, but, needle's barely moving. And then he had a 3-band, what the hell's the company? They make the blue stuff, the Scandinavian company.
Oh.
They've got the 3-band multi-band compressor. Tube Tech. Thanks, Mark. My producer Mark feeding me all the shit I can't remember. But I mean, literally, like that was it. But he's one of those engineers, I think, like Nigel, where you can get it going on the console and it'll sound great. And then Al would sit down and he didn't even touch anything. And all of a sudden it just pops into 3D and is better than you could ever make it sound. And he hasn't done anything. So for him, it was the ability to use reverbs, really, and balance. Yeah. Magic.
Voodoo.
Yeah. All right. So back to one of the masters of voodoo, Nigel Godrich, can't get enough of him. Let's talk about him some more.
Yeah. He loves a tall latte.
Let's
Which
tall. It's good to know that
that
is
was always my joke was we made so many records at Ocean Way. Once in a blue moon, not once in a blue, like a couple times a week, Nigel would just get a hair. I think he would just, and thank God he would do it because so many people don't do it. Hey, Des, let's go for a walk. Let's go get a coffee. Great. Sunlight. Oh, let me put on my SPF 5000 to go outside for 5 minutes. I love it. You know, whenever you get your physical for engineers, I'm sure the first thing so you're vitamin D deficient. Huh.
that's weird.
That's weird. Anywho, so we, East West, damn it, I hate the name. I hate the fact they changed the names of these studios. It drives me crazy. So Ocean Way sits basically on the corner of Sunset and Gower in Hollywood, has been there for years. And then, but then on the other side of Gower is the Gulch, which has a Rite Aid and a couple of restaurants that we used to order from all the time. But there's been a Starbucks in there forever, ever and ever. And obviously it makes its money, its gravy train from the lot, Sunset Gower lot, which I was told at one point in time was Desilu, but I don't think that's correct.
That might be right, actually.
Okay. Doesn't matter.
I can't remember, but that might be right.
Yeah, and what's even more funny is I found out later on how many of my favorite shows were actually shot at that lot while I was in the fucking studio, while my VCR, yes, people, I said VCR, was running at home capturing my favorite show that was recorded there. But anyhow, so we take like a 15-minute like stretch our legs, walk, get up, get a coffee, blah blah blah. And being the caffeine coffee junkie that I am, I was always like, fuck yeah. But obviously it didn't start with Travis, but I remember taking a break so the second record we did together was Sea Change, just Beck Sea Change. So walk up, get a coffee, walk in the Starbucks, guess what's playing on the radio? Travis, the Invisible Band. Tracked and mixed at Ocean Way Studios, 2 blocks up the street. Okay, cool. Fast forward, Radiohead. Take a break, walk up, get a coffee. Guess what's playing in Starbucks?
Sea Change.
Sea Change. Okay, this is kind of interesting. A couple months later, Sir Paul McCartney. Take a little break, walk up, get a coffee. Guess what's playing in Starbucks? Radiohead. Hell the Thief. It continues. Starting the information at Ocean Way. We were somewhere in the middle. Take a break, walk up, get a coffee. Guess what's playing in Starbucks? Fine Line, Sir Paul McCartney. Then I was to the point where I was like, can I just talk to the manager? You guys want an ISDN in here?
Yeah, I think Nigel's calling him up. Play my records.
When I walk in there.
All right, now come on, man. Fucking Radiohead. Let's talk about Radiohead.
They were a good band. Next. No. Radiohead, man, such an honor and experience to be an American engineer working in a very English camp, by the way. And, just because that's where they lived and worked and that kind of thing. And then to the point to where Ed's like a couple days into the session, Ed said to me, Darrell, you guys in America, you have lovely mic stands. I was like, now come to fruition, I would figure out what he was talking about a year later, or maybe less. But I was like, thank you, Ed. And I was like, but you haven't worked in an American studio before? And he's like, no, it's my first time working in America at a studio, touring, obviously different. He's like, no. He's like, no, we've always recorded in England, but I think they did something. Kid A, they might have done some part of Kid A Amnesiac in France for a bit of time.
Right.
I think they did. Don't hold me to that. It was just funny him saying that. But no, man, radio was just fucking nuts. all of the toys that they brought, and watching Johnny just do his thing. And then Johnny was using Cycle 74 software.
Oh, Max.
Max.
Yeah.
The early inversions of Max, and he was just mad scientist sit in the corner and make these stupid algorithms that would just do crazy shit. And then him, but then, and funny enough, because of the time frame that it was, we had to rent a whole Pro Tools rig for him to do the Max thing for the latency, because normally he was just used to banging it in a quote unquote inbox, but there was like just insane latency because of the USB.
Right.
It was just kind of funny that there was an entire TDM system sitting over in the corner just so he could go bop, 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 bop on his guitar. But still, but it's funny watching Johnny, because Johnny's just always like his pedal board guitar setup is basically his setup. If he's going to do a keyboard, he just bangs it in the side and everything comes out of one thing. So in that instance, like when you're dealing with Radiohead, it's like the setup isn't that kind of crazy, even though there's a bunch of dudes running around on stage or in the studio with a bunch of different inputs. It's kind of like they just use the same source material. It's never like, hey, I need a DI and I need that. It's pretty funny in that aspect,
right?
About how Radiohead works in that. But the thing about Radiohead, which I don't know if bands do a lot or it's just particular, they go in their barn for a month or two and they just bash out songs and work them up as a band before they step into a studio and start recording. Like they quote unquote do their homework of what their sort of role is in that particular song, but that at the same token, they're not married to it. So if something gets thrown out the window because the song doesn't fit, it doesn't fit in the song, and they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I just need to think of something else or figure out something else. So it is what it is. So you get this situation of coming in and cutting songs that sound pretty freaking done quickly. It's a matter of, is the song going to survive? I learned that quick. I learned there's a couple versions of songs that I thought were just really amazing, and then they got flipped upside down. And then when they did get flipped upside down, thinking, I don't know if I like this as much, but I'm not in the band and I'm not the producer. So obviously this is my just thinking in my head of how it goes. And then of course, they're all insane musicians. They play so well together. Tom is an insane singer. So a lot of his vocals are tracking vocals, with the exception of wild hair up his butt. For some reason, he feels like he wants to re-sing this one. Okay, cool. Or the track is piecemealed, which happens a lot.
Right.
You know, some songs are band songs and some songs are piecemeal songs. So.
And is Nigel part of the pre-production in the barn, or he's hearing it for the first time in the studio?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Right.
And then they were thing too for a while. They would always have tours going on back when the world was open, and slowly back up. But they would play songs. Like I know they were out touring Kid A, Amnesiac, but they were also playing Hell of the Thief songs live.
Yeah, well, I mean, they like Pyramid Song. They played like 12 tours before they actually recorded it or whatever. They're stuff that just sticks around until they get it right in the studio.
Yeah.
So was there a big difference in your role and also sort of Nigel's interaction between Radiohead, where, I mean, he's practically a band member in the studio, and it's seems to be a very comfortable peer relationship, and with the other records that you'd already made with him? Was that a really different experience, or is it just kind of the same deal?
Different experience. Where it was one of the reasons I feel like Nigel's one of the greatest producers in my generation to walk the face of the earth, quite honestly, is he has such a stance on like how the ship is driven in the state of making the record. Not to saying he's just like a it's my way or the highway kind of thing, but it's like just his method of working where he's just this is the goal for the day, boys, let's do it kind of mentality. And then in Radiohead, it's more of like an equal share thing of they get together, put their heads together and go, okay, what do you want to do today? Oh, let's do 2 + 2 = 5. Okay, cool. And then let's do it this way and da da da. But there's also a lot of like Tom having an idea sonically of how to do something and blah blah, and then he tells Nigel, and Nigel goes, oh, that's easy. It's where I'm not sure if it's just Tom to not technically knowing how to achieve something, or he doesn't really care how it's done. It's just something he's hearing in his head, and he brings it up, and Nigel interprets it and says, "Oh, I know how to do that." And sure enough, I saw it time and time again.
Right.
Yeah.
And so was your role any different on that record because his role was different, or not so much?
Well, I'll say this in the sense of like when I was working on Radiohead, that's when the first time I felt like I was engineering with Nigel and not assisting for Nigel. Even though a lot of my daily duties were more of an assistant nature, he was having me do it a lot more, quote unquote, engineering stuff, running Pro Tools, running tape machines. He was actually sometimes getting sounds for him, literally engineering shit. And
right.
then, performance editing, cleaning up crossfades, that kind of thing, which they didn't really understand or know how to do. And then also they wanted me. So I'm not sure what your sequencer is behind you, but Johnny obviously has several renditions of the same thing, and most of them run off CV clock. And so Johnny and Nigel looked at me and goes, hey, so we've had an issue. We've been trying to figure this out. We can't really figure it out. I was like, what's that? And they're like, so we want to be able to record to a click and drive the modular with CV. And I didn't know what CV was. That was the first time I heard about it. And I said, what's the thing? What's the CV thing? And I said, oh, it's the clock that comes out of here. And I said, oh, it's clock. And he said, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, well, give me a snippet of it, record it. So I recorded it in Pro Tools and blew it up. And oh, sure enough, it's just like black clock. And they're like, well, can you make it do tempo changes and da 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 da, like it basically chase? And yeah, with Pro Tools. So I would sit there and just edit it a bar, CV to the grid, and then if they wanted the tempo, and then make it a bar loop, and then loop it across, and then play it back. And they were like, that's fucking genius.
So you're actually editing CV clock.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was one thing where they wanted like the tempo faster, and they were like, can you do that? And I was like, yeah. In the time compression expansion back in those days were pretty freaking limited, but luckily the CV was...
It's a square wave. I mean,
it's a square wave, but then again, I couldn't get away with too much of it. So I realized like I had to just grab the original piece I did and whatever tempo they wanted, loop it, make it a bar or 2-bar loop, and then across the... And then they're like, oh, that's amazing. Like, and Tom, funny enough, gave me credit. He was like, Darrell figured out a way to have our modular synth chase Pro Tools.
Well done, sir. It's huge. It's huge. I mean, because now there are a couple of different plugins where you can do that, where you can spit out clock from Pro Tools and stuff. But at the time, there's a great set of plugins from, I cannot remember the name of the company, but I will remember it and just blurt it out in a Tourette's way later on. Expert Sleepers. They make some modules, but they also do a suite of plugins that are genius. You can do these incredible like stepped LFOs that will follow tempo map, and then any output that is I can't remember that electronically can carry CV, it'll just spit it out of a Pro Tools output and
Yeah,
works
because
great.
modulars, we're going on a really dark rabbit hole, but the modulars, from what I understand, they do have what, MIDI time code? That
No, I mean I'm sure someone makes a module that will get MIDI timecode and spit out clock. Yeah.
has a couple of smaller modulars, and then he had specifically, I think it was a MIDI modular receiver,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, you can spit
Yeah.
MIDI time.
I got one over there. Yeah. So you give it timecode and it'll spit out clock, and then you can pop it into a clock divider. And
But he said that, but then when I talked to my friend about it, he was like, yeah, but it's not that. I don't remember exactly what he said.
well, it'll get the speed right, but it won't get you like on the beat necessarily.
Oh, that's probably what it was.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just chasing CV, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that is a rabbit hole. But Expert Sleepers, they also make the black stuff right up next to the Alien. It's optical in and out, optical to CV. So you can use optical as your, like, come optical out of an 192 or an Apollo or whatever, go into these modules, and it's DC coupled outputs that are made for CV. So the CV will absolutely work. And then you can have the Expert Sleepers plugins in the session, and they'll follow tempo maps. They'll do anything. It's awesome. Anyway, that is a rabbit hole. So, but we did get to the core of my real question was, so this is when you started really engineering for Nigel and kind of stepped up doing that, which obviously that carried on.
Yeah. Carried on. The Radiohead record was started in August of 2002, and then went through that was when, so started in August in LA. I think they worked for 2, maybe 3 weeks. I can't remember. And then the whole reason I have the career of what I have is because I just made an off joke to Nigel, like, because they were only booked for 2 or 3 weeks, whatever it was, in LA, and they had every intention of going back to London or England to finish. And then I just made a joke of like, well, maybe I could come with you guys, go back to England and finish the record. And then Nigel was like, wait a minute. So he checked, and the band was cool with it, manager was cool with it, and and the next thing you know, I'm on a plane.
Nice. Well done. Good joke.
Yep. Yeah. Where I learned the intricacies of a cup of tea in an English winter.
Yeah. And where were you guys working at that point?
Oh, at Butts, at their studio.
Right.
In Austin. Yeah.
Yeah. See, now that's the thing. I mean, assistant and runner in the States, but T-boy in the UK. And you can't overstress how important T is to a session. Like, Flood's nickname is because he was the guy who always brought tea, and apparently the other assistant at the studio's nickname was Drought, because he never got anybody tea, and he did not make it in this industry.
Yeah, and that was my point. I did because when I did the Radiohead record, we never stepped foot in a quote unquote commercial facility, which I was a little disappointed about, because at one token in time, there was discussion of doing like strings and horns and things like that, and they were talking about going to air, blah blah blah. And I was like, oh please, can we go to air? That'd be amazing. Please. Nah, we're not going to do that. Oh, fuck. So I was just sort of stuck out in the English countryside. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
My room gets really stuffy, so if I open up that door,
you should open it up. If there are any ghosts, I'll let you know.
But it doesn't seem my partner's not here today. I close it when I'm just doing interviews, so in case my partner comes in, unless he doesn't care. But anywho, so yeah, my first experience of stepping ahead of time is Paul McCartney, where I was at a proper session in sunny London at Rack Studios, and the tea boy was bringing in tea and coffee like every 30 fucking minutes. And because I'm a severe caffeine junkie, no, even though my heartbeat is about ready to pound out of my eye socket because I'm so jacked up from tips. Fuck you up, man. And it's good.
Yep.
It's not just like, and to me, tea is like, okay, if you give me like a good iced tea, I'm like, yeah, this is a good iced tea. Would you like some iced coffee? Yes, please. Go away, iced tea. I'm here for my coffee. So for me to pass up a cup of coffee over a cup of tea, that says a lot. That says a lot. But
nice.
Holy, mess you up.
Perfect.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, Nigel took you with him to England, and then you kept working. You worked on the Paul McCartney record. So did you leave Ocean Way at that point, or were you just like on a hiatus, or how'd that work?
No, I finished the Radiohead record. I kind of came back to the States. We finished the record. And then I kept working I kept assisting at Ocean Way a little bit. I didn't have the like Nigel took a break or a hiatus. I don't remember what the situation was, but then there just wasn't anything going on. So I actually needed work. So I was still technically employed by Ocean Way. And I remember assisting. And funny enough, I remember assisting on a couple of gigs, and they were like, the engineers were like, wait, what's your name? Darrell Thorp. Didn't you just work on Radiohead? Yeah. I should be assisting you. I'm like, no, it's not how it works, bro. Yeah. So, but timing is everything. And thank God I had the Ocean Way thing still kind of going. Yeah. It wasn't until Kelly, the studio manager at the time, when she months down the road called me and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, Kelly, I'm so sorry. I should have just manned up and called you earlier, but I've been really hemming and hawing over this. Da, 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 da. It's just the security blanket of just having a steady paycheck. You know what I mean?"
Yeah.
And I think it's time for me to go independent and be on my own for a while. But if I fail miserably, can I get my job back? She's like, "Fuck yeah." So I was like, "Okay, well, I feel a little better." So I gave my notice and went independent.
It kind of worked out.
It kind of worked out, but it was pretty like it wasn't a smooth transition. You know what I mean? And only in the sense of like I'd get like a couple of weeks of work, and then I'd have nothing for a month, and then I'd get a week or two of work or a month of work, and then I'd have enough for 2 months. And so it was pretty like up and down and up and down. So, but it worked. I came out on the other side.
Yeah, and you still had Nigel stuff coming and going during that, right? You had another Beck record, you had Tom's record, Charlotte Gainsbourg, like they're Air.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Anything in particular you would like to say about any of those records?
Man, Air, I didn't, funny enough, here we go again. I didn't know who Air was until we started doing Walkie Talkie. And first of all, Nico and Jean-Manoir are so sweet, such great guys, and God, fuck, they're so talented. But then seeing them do the thing, because that was an interesting entity. They wanted to come to the studio. They wanted to come in the studio with Nigel for, I think, 2 weeks, kind of have Nigel executive produce, do a bunch of overdubs while they were there. And then once they were done overdubbing, start having Nigel mix. So then I ended up engineering all these overdub parts with JB and Nico. And it was really crazy to see them do the thing, even though it was a really stripped down version, and hanging out with them and listening to the songs. The songs were so fucking cool off that record, especially, which I'm almost positive I put it on my list because it's
well, Run and Space Maker are on there. Yeah.
Right. um, obviously Nico saying to me when I first heard it, like, "Hey Nico, I know this is a really good song, but I know it's a 10cc ripoff inspiration thing, even though it wasn't. Yeah, but it was much much simpler for them to do than 10cc."
Right. So,
um,
all right. So, but we got a couple other records in here, which were interesting to me. Well, you've also got the From the Basement series. I mean, if we just sort of keep going on Nigel for a second, and we can circle back to a couple other things you were doing. So when did that start? How did that start? Because you were, I mean, I was lucky enough to be around while you were helping him out on the Chili Peppers one. And obviously I've watched the Radiohead one about 7 million times. Um, were you involved the whole time on that? Or was it only certain
the
ones?
whole time, the only thing that I was not involved with for whatever reason when they cut the second season, I was not around at all. I had other commitments going on, and so it and commitments that were set in stone that I couldn't move, and I didn't really. I had to have a conversation with Nigel about it, and he was like, "Well, I mean, of course, I'll miss you, but I don't want you to piss off your other clients just to move something around for." And they cut the second season in like 2 or 3 weeks. Like, it was pretty well-oiled machine how they banged it out.
Right.
And
Do you want to talk about that for a little bit? Because I mean, I think people are aware of certain specific ones, but like, I mean, that season, that's 2 or 3 weeks, and you're talking what, 10 bands coming in?
or I don't. Okay, Andrew, forgive me. I don't remember much about the second season except for what they cut.
Well, I mean, let's talk about the stuff you did work on, because it's a pretty amazing thing, and there are a lot more episodes of it than people realize for some reason.
Yeah, because there's always been this weird, like, contractual. I'm not sure how much I can talk about issue where I mean, a lot of the stuff you find online is all pirated stuff, and nobody seems to take it down or care. And obviously, the ones that have always seen the light of day were the two Radiohead ones they did. And I wasn't involved in the first one, but I wasn't involved in the In Rainbows version. Unfortunately, once again, I had a scheduling conflict where I couldn't go because they cut that in England. But then I was involved with the King of Limbs one, which was fucking amazing. That's when like, for me, oh my gosh. We were sitting there, like King of Limbs, we cut, the schedule was 2.5 days to cut every song. So, because we did 2 or 3 takes of each song, and more so you do the multiple takes because every time a take is done, the cameras shift and they just get different angles. But that's when I remember sitting at Maid of L, which BBC Maid of L, which is no longer, unfortunately, in that room. And the room's odd because you sit this way, desks in front of you, speakers, blah, blah, blah. But the tracking room's to your right, and there's a big piece of glass right here.
They love their sideways control rooms in England. It's not my favorite thing.
Well, I mean, that studio was more of like a broadcast.
Well, Maid of Vale, yeah, they did a lot of the music stuff though. But yeah, I mean, were you in the orchestra room?
Yeah, we were in the orchestra room.
Yeah.
So, but I got to backtrack because dude, it was so funny. Like, we're there day one, and I'm at the studio, and then things are rolling in, and it's a video shoot. So us poor audio schlops are always waiting on the fucking video guys to get their shit together before we can do anything. And then, so I'm there, and then I'm just kind of sort of getting the control room going, and then Nigel, I talk about what goes where and da 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 as far as inputs lists and things like that, and I patch it all up. And but meanwhile, what was funny to me is I was doing everything. I was patching everything. I was doing all the routing. I was making the IO in Pro Tools. I was like, it's just like everything that was done. And then I kind of, like, Nigel comes in, and then the staff BBC engineers kind of meander out of the room for a little while, and I go, Nigel, can I ask? Like, I'm dude, I'm happy for the work, but why the fuck am I here? And he's like, you'll figure it out. And I go, okay. And then I did say, well, it is funny because I've done everything. And he was like, and that's why you're here.
Yeah.
So then the lighting rig goes up, the camera trolleys are set, and so the backline finally gets set up, and then I've got my input list and and then the BBC guys are standing there, and I'm just kind of like, mic stands. Oh. Mic stands show up.
And now you knew what Ed was talking about.
Microphones. Oh. Microphones. Mic fucking cables. Oh. And then that's when Nigel came in. He's like, now you know what I'm fucking talking about. That's why I brought you here. Okay. Well, happy for the work, but still, it was just sort of.
Right.
And that was when we were like a day or two into the session, and I'm standing there at that big glass. Nigel's sitting in the center, the listening sweet spot listening position, and I'm just watching Radiohead do their thing, and I'm just like, fuck, they're such a good band. That's when you just, like, the pieces of the puzzle fall into place, and you realize like how fucking talented somebody is, like, just as a band, like how, or an individual artist. And those moments don't come too often to me in this, like, I don't know why, but that epiphany moment of just like, oh, that's why they're fucking Radiohead, because they're fucking Radiohead, and they're just that dialed in and good. And I don't know if it's experience or if it's just God-given talent. I'm not sure what it is.
I think it's all of the above, and the fact that they've spent their entire adult lives playing as a band.
Yeah. It's the same thing that when I record Dave Grohl playing guitar, fuck. But it's especially when I record him playing drums. When I heard Joni Mitchell sing for the first time, it's just those crazy epiphany moments that we have as insiders into the realm of a record making process where something kind of flips on.
Yeah.
And I have those same epiphanies like in live settings, like like the first time I heard, I've never seen Bruce Springsteen before. I've only seen him once. It was at the Grammys, and he played his, like, I think, he did an acoustic thing, and it might have been was it Devils and Dust? Maybe I'm crossing my wires, but he did an acoustic thing. He sat up there, he sat on stage, and he sitting, playing his acoustic guitar, singing his balls, and I was just like, oh my God, what the hell? And then at the end, he does this crazy, like, aggressive harmonica solo where he's literally trying to blow up the harmonica. And you're, whoa, dude, once again, epiphany, like, oh my God. And other than that, I've never seen him. And I feel like I should at some point in my life get a chance to see him. But it's like stuff like that you're like, wow, pretty fucking lucky to be standing here in a studio in England and watching, one of the world's coolest, most renowned bands do their thing in front of me and going, wow. It's really crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's when you hear it on a record, like, you don't know what went into it. But when you're watching it just come out of people, it is crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's literally the religious experience of that. Yeah.
So you're a fan.
I am a fan now. I was not a fan then. And then Nigel said to me, he's like, you know why it worked, Darrell? I mean, not because you're talented at what you do. It's because you were not a fan of them when you worked with them. So therefore the air was more casual and calm.
Well,
but same token, I was like, dude, even if I was a fan, I feel like I'm professional enough to ride the line of today I'm wearing the engineer hat. But then if we get in a situation of socially drinking, then I love that record, bro. that's all that has to be said and moving on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talked about it a couple hours ago. The ability to be in a room with people that are iconic and famous and blah, 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 and just treat them like normal people.
Yeah. Yeah. I worked with Jessica Chastain on a movie. And then one of my favorite movies she stars in, Zero Dark 30. And then she was nominated for an Academy Award. She didn't win, but I always think of like why she was nominated, because she's such a badass. She was the most chill human being, super sweet, super nice, funny, cracking jokes. But I did tell her, I was like, hey, that movie is like that's a remote dropper for me. She's like, oh, thank you. And that was the only time that I got out of unprofessional Darrell.
Well, you had a little Dukes of Hazzard moment too. I mean, come on, let's be honest.
Well, I was saying in that particular session.
Yeah. That's fine. I mean, look, to be able to do it, it's the situations we find ourselves in. It's insane, and sometimes you have to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
I think it took me like 3 records to tell the Chili Peppers about when I saw them in '86 in Miami while I was still in college.
Really?
Yeah, they played a punk club down there in Miami Beach. And all I remember about it is, first of all, they were fucking awesome. And then after the gig, they were like hanging out in the street and there was some big fight and they had to run. But it was amazing. It was an absolutely mind-blowing gig. And then to work with them 15, 20 years later, whatever it was. But it took me forever to actually tell them. Because you don't want to ruin it either. You don't want to be Chris Farley.
You're really scared of like, is this going to go well? Is it going to go bad? Like of crossing that line, you've all of a sudden crossed that line of professional into fan.
Yeah, which they don't want around them while they're trying to do their thing necessarily. I mean, some artists do because it's a stroke, but
it's a stroke of the ego. But then some artists are like, oh, well, some artists like Dave Grohl is like generally like, oh, thank you, man. And funny enough, and Barry Gibb is the same way. Truly, like, just like, you were a fan of the Bee Gees? Oh, wow. Oh, thank you. Oh, that's so nice to hear. Like, he just like, and maybe it's the stroke of the ego. I don't know. But at the same token, it's a little bit of like, with Barry, I know it's a little bit of like this weird kooky insecurity thing that hovers around his head and his artistry. And when he hears somebody like praise or being a fan, he lights up like a little kid, just like, oh wow, just to be accepted.
Amazing.
Yeah, but it kind of made sense when I saw the documentary of why that is, but I can't put my finger on that.
Right, for sure. Right. Well, there were a lot of Gibbs for a while.
A lot of Gibbs for a while.
A lot of Gibbs. Mm-hmm. All right, man. Look, we're almost 3 hours in, and there's so much shit we have not talked about yet.
Is there part 2?
Well, I don't know. Do we want to do a part 2, or do we want to start like cranking through? I feel like I mean, we've got. What's that?
What do you want to do?
I feel like let's set up a part 2, because if we start at the end of the Nigel era, kind of as you branch out of there, because we've got the whole Nashville thing, following Dave Cobb and doing all those records. We've got you doing some production. We've got you working with like Charlotte Gainsbourg, with Beck producing, and like all this cross-pollination stuff. And none of that even gets to the Foo Fighters stuff, which we got to spend some time on. It's a lot.
Wow.
And we skipped over Ray Charles and Thurston Moore.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Ray Charles was like well, Ray Charles is easy. I mean, that was amazing to work on because I did meet him. Unfortunately, he was starting to feel pretty. It was at his time of his he was sick. He just wasn't healthy at all at that point in time. But it was amazing to work with him. But that was a one song thing, and I got a assisting credit on. Um, but but and then obviously too, and that was the only time I've met and worked with BB King too. He was on that gig.
Right.
So and BB was what a sweetheart, what a nice human being. And then the organ player,
Which
Mark, the Beatles organ player.
oh yeah, who
Waiting,
oh,
waiting for Mark. Mark's still not texting.
oh, for fuck's sake. How can you
Bill?
not Billy Preston.
Billy Preston. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Another
got
super
yeah.
nice, unbelievably talented dude.
Yeah, I only worked with him that one time. And it's amazing. Don't you think about like the craziness of our career, how like what we do, like it's such a small community. And you don't every day you don't really think about how small of a community is until you get a bunch of us at a trade show together. And then you start counting heads and you realize, oh, there's not that many of us.
No, and the weird thing to me is that like we know each other and we've got a lot of mutual friends and whatever, and then every once in a while there'll be a whole nother group that you've never met any of them.
Dude, totally.
And like, you guys have been like the other side of walls from me for decades. And I don't know who any of you are. I mean, I know your names and whatever, but yeah, you end up with these groups and they don't cross-pollinate sometimes. And yeah, it's a weird profession. But I mean, look, the list of names that we can both sit here and say, oh, and I was during the blah, blah, blah. And it's not because we're name dropping. It's because we've been lucky enough to be in the room with these people.
And it gets to the point, can I just say, like, I just spoke with, like, Warren Hewitt asked me to do a little Q&A thing with one of his classes, like in-person classes. And they started talking about something to do with, God damn it. The conversation was something to do with the Beatles. And then of course that triggered something in my head. Well, Paul told me.
Exactly.
Wait. Which Paul?
Sir Paul?
Sir Paul.
Yeah.
Sir Paul McCartney told me. In that instance, it was actually Sir Paul McCartney. I'll say he liked to tell me stories about early recording stuff, which was really fascinating. And then hearing from some of my earlier employers, like Tom Murphy, who on track record of like why like the music business or recording business is sort of the way it's been shaped now, where artists didn't like the quote unquote laboratory white coat, blight fluorescent like thinking mentality of recording. And funny enough, and Elvis was a big spearhead of that as well, not realizing that until learning that until recently. But yeah, he was Sir Paul, he was like, oh yeah, we had 3 hours of blocks of sessions, and it was like literally just go in a fucking closet and don't you dare come out of there without a song.
Yeah.
And then, but we couldn't hear shit. The headphones were terrible. We didn't know what the hell was going on. And to this day, he can kind of like, he doesn't really need, like he told me, he's like, no, I don't really need headphones. I just need some sort of rhythmic guiding and I'll figure out where I am. That's kind of how he rolls to this day, because he's so acclimated to just the way the technology was.
Yeah.
The Beatles.
That's just all their live shows were like that. I mean, Shea Stadium famously, but
reverb, you do a pass. Can I get less reverb? You turn it down. Can I get some delay? Da-da-da. Oh, my cans sound a little dark. Can you brighten them up? And it's like, look, the problem isn't your fucking headphones. The problem is you.
Yeah, that always goes over well when you say that in a session.
We're all thinking it.
Yeah.
What do I say? Everybody's thinking it.
Yeah, look, man, if you can play Shea Stadium using the built-in public address announcement system, you know, it's crazy. But okay, so talk about a story just to tie like lots of really weird, disparate things together. My son Jake went to college with this guy whose grandfather was the American Vox representative who had to go on tour with the Beatles when they came over because they couldn't bring any of their English Vox amps because, of course, the power. So he supplied the American Vox amps that were all built in the live room of what became Sound City because that was the Vox factory for a while. So this kid's grandfather was on the field at Shea Stadium in case the amps blew up.
The original guitar tech.
Yeah, but he was he was the manufacturer rep because they were lending him a bunch of amps.
That stuff goes. And then the other one is not the Stones. Oh, damn it. My brain does not work anymore. I'll think of it in a second. There's sorry, oh God, English band. Who's the guitarist that did the Windmill?
Oh, the Who, Pete Townsend.
Okay, so there's this, speaking of Dave Cobb, Dave is like this walking encyclopedia of guitar amps and the history of guitar amps and guitars and stuff like that. He just dives deep. But I remember there's a photo of the Who, and what I kept noticing was it was what 8x10s. Two 8x10s stacked on each other, which, dude, first of all, can you imagine how ungodly loud that? And he's standing right in front of this.
Yeah,
this is up in the 60s or something, late 60s, blah blah blah. But it was their guitar techs who begged Marshall to make a 4x10 so it could be easily moved because they kept hurting themselves moving those 8x10 cabinets, which is why we have the 4x10 cabinet to this day.
There you go. And Pete was just going to put his guitar through it anyway, so who cared?
Well, I don't think he really cared. He just wanted to make sure there were 10 speakers.
Right. Well, and that's why you got the straight and the slant, so you can pop them on top. Looks like one big thing. Yeah. There you go.
And now you just put dummies up.
Yeah.
There's a pod behind the stage.
Yeah. The old kidney-shaped one. Actually, is it more of a kidney or more of a bedpan? Now that I think about it,
bedpan.
It's a little bedpan. Huh. All right. On that note, what do you say we bring in Mark for a little Q&A?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. He's on a little bit of delay because no, my God, he's not.
Hello.
He's so ready.
How's it going?
Good.
Let's do this.
Let's fucking do this, man.
Let's do it. Okay, I'm going to talk to the people for a second. Darrell, I'm sending you a message on Zoom to read. And then you just let me know. So, guys, everybody watching, YouTube, Crowdcast, all that. If you're watching on Crowdcast, you can submit a question for Darrell, and you guys can upvote each other's questions. We're going to work our way down the list from the most upvoted question to the least. And then also, after this interview, Darrell has 2 amazing videos on pureMix that you could go check out. There's one of him mixing a live Foster the People song and another one with the band called Future Elevators. So make sure you guys check those out.
Oh, yeah, Future Elevators. Love that band.
Are they like escalators now and they're hoping to be elevators?
They're not really a thing anymore, unfortunately.
Well, I guess stairs would be future escalators.
So Future Elevators was one of these bands. My very good friend, his name is Jeffrey Kane. He was in Remy Zero for years and years until they defuncted. They just stopped. And then, so he decided, they're from Alabama originally. So he decided to move his family back to Alabama, where it's just less expensive and not LA to raise his kids, you know. And when he went there, he obviously he's like royalty walking down the street because he was in a massive touring band. And man, he just found all these crazy talented artists that just lived there and started a little label. And Future Elevators is one of them. Like his songwriters is Michael Sheckford. The songwriter is insane. So, and I get the pleasure of mixing a lot of the stuff, and it's most of the stuff is so good. It's really crazy.
That's great. You can't go anywhere really. Well, there are places because they're so fucking tied up in war or something like that. But even there will be crazy talented musicians doing stuff that no one will ever hear outside of their home region or whatever.
Yeah, you think that the Spotify would still break that barrier down, but it doesn't seem.
Well, but it's just like the scrolling algorithms on Facebook. Like they want to keep you listening, so they're not going to test you.
Right.
Like you like this, here's something exactly like that.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Anyway, Mark, what do you got?
Awesome. All right. So that question or another, Darrell?
It's obviously controversial.
I don't quite understand the question.
Does it have to do with penises?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
does.
in that case, I don't know. We really shouldn't answer that. I don't feel like we're penis authorities.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that question. So
it's commenting on a comment from another person.
Well, to be honest,
I always made a thing of it. You know,
I don't really know. I've never heard that comment before.
Cool.
So something to do with penises, but we're not going to answer it. So let's move on and let's equal opportunity. We'll have some vagina questions or not.
Okay.
I just got myself in trouble just talking about sexual reproductive organs. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on. All right. So first question is from Johansson75. And he wants to know, do you still use UA's Ocean Way plugin a lot? If so, how do you usually integrate it into your mixes? Secondly, would you mind sharing any advice on how to make a record sound in your face, but still have it have some air and space to breathe? Since this is my top thing I like about your mixes. Thank you very much.
Okay. So the first part of the question, yes. Man, I used the Ocean Way plugin all the time in various applications when I thought it was necessary and needed. But it's funny, I'm finding I had a client who was he was sort of like in this mindset of just wanted the drums to feel bigger and roomier and bigger and roomier, even though the room mics had a lot of meat and potato into them, but I just couldn't sort of quote unquote contain elements of the room mic. So I found with him, I was starting to use the Ocean Way room a lot on all the songs, and he was really receptive to that because I could just control what fed it as far as like the kick, snare, whatever, toms, that kind of thing, and keep the cymbals down to a bleed or not at all. And then just because I use templates like everybody else, I found myself importing like a template on another project and then using the Ocean Way plugin in tandem with the drum mics that I was given. And I'm really liking the result. And the clients seem to be liking it as well. And so I've kind of just implemented it into my everyday functionality. Kind of weird how that happened, but yes. So I love the plugin and I use it all the time now, especially. As far as that in your face clarity thing, man, I'm sorry to say, I wish I could give you like a particular responsive answer to that, but man, it's some sort of like this over periods of times, you just have to like sort of figure out the way you hear things in your head. Because I feel like over the course of my career, at one point I was focusing on the low end, and then I sort of figured out what I like about the low end. And then the next point in my career, I was figuring out top end and how bright or dark to make things sound. And then I figured that out. And then I started researching more and more with like the mid range. And then I figured out, I feel like I've gotten to a point to where I can make things aggressive sounding, but still exciting to listen to and aggressive, but not hurt and not harsh, which is what I'm always striving hard to do. So I hope that helps.
Awesome. Okay. Next one. This is from Shane McMahon. Can you give any advice on vocal doubling techniques? Do you pan the double track or stack them directly? How many vocal doubles do you do? My vocal doubling doesn't sound as natural as professionally mixed records that I listen to. Thanks.
Oh, really? Well, I guess my comment would be to you. I, it's always a case by case basis. I guess it depends on how tight or not tight do you want the double to be. In a lot of cases, if the singer is pretty good and they can, some people are just really good at matching pitch and timing as well. And if they're not, or they can't figure out the rhythm of it, then I'll just do a little editing where I'm matching up timing. And funny enough, even if pitch is slightly off in a double, if you match the tone, that starts feeling a lot better. And then of course, if you want pitch to match, then tune. But I would suggest maybe just start there where you're trying to match the time first, the timing of each, the verse and the double, the lead vocal and the double vocal. But me, myself, I usually just do two, unless it's supposed to feel like a choir or more of that aspect. Then yeah, I'll stack more on top and then pan at my discretion. I don't know. I just go, this should be panned, and I pan it, call it a day.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of traditional to tuck in the double, but it feels thicker and it's a little bit messier, and you pan it a little bit or whatever. But if you also want a masterclass in the other type of vocal doubling, go listen to early Pink Floyd records, and those are doubled and hard panned.
Oh, really?
Just, yeah, amazing how tight the performances are, but they're absolutely doubled. There's just enough variation. And obviously, back in the day, they're not tuning, they're not editing. The phrasing is worked out. And that is part of it. Maybe some of the reason you're having trouble using a double is that the lead vocal itself doesn't have the pocket and the phrasing that it needs to really carry the song. So that the double, because the double, it's a sonic thing. It's not a performance thing. And like I can often comp a lead vocal and then take second choices for the rest from everything and make a double. And it's going to be close enough 90% of the time. So... yeah. Anyway, blah.
Or you're a freak of nature like Dave Grohl, and you sing it once, sing it again, sing it a third time, sing it a fourth time. And you put them all together and they make a stat. I don't know how he does that.
Because he's Dave Grohl.
Yes. Makes my job
Awesome.
Yeah. Not everyone can be Dave Grohl, but if you're doing music like that, you got to try to be. That's the thing. Yeah. You can't say, well, I'm not Dave Grohl. You got to try and be better than Dave Grohl, otherwise you're not trying.
You're not trying hard enough.
There you go. Okay. So this next question, I don't know if you guys want to cover it in part 2 or not, but I'll just throw it out there. This is from Colin Dupuis, and he asks, can Darrell go over the recording techniques for Beck's Paper Tiger and the Charlotte Gainsborough album?
That's a long question.
It's a long question.
I mean, we're going to talk about that, but you feel free, cover it now if you want.
So, well, I mentioned earlier in the session, like how, like what the setup is, like the drum setup is for Travis. It was the same for C Change, like 47 fat snare, 57 top and bottom, C12As in the toms, and then 47 tube on the mono overhead. And that was all there was, is a mono overhead. But the thing that's really sexy and probably is the reason it is the way it is because Paper Tiger is actually mixed off the Slave reel. And the Slave reel was actually the strings reel. So Nigel did stereo. So the drums were a stereo bounce, and then the bass was a bounce, and then I can't remember if Beck sang on that slave reel or not, or the vocal was already done when they did it, and so that was a bounce. But then I remember when he no Beck's the slave was the vocal comp reel as well. Now I remember because I did mention to Nigel like, hey, I could grab the master reel and put it back up, and he was like, eh. So the drum, some of the drum like the drum in almost a way or parallel is like because the drums are hitting tape twice. It's just that tape compression thing going on that just made this magic happen.
Wow.
Seriously.
All right.
And then,
That's really cool.
what's the other one? Charlotte? Which Charlotte?
Yeah. It doesn't specify. Just says the Charlotte Gainsborough record.
Let's get into that next. We haven't talked
Yeah,
about that.
because there's one that Nigel produced and then
Cool.
one that Beck produced. So
Awesome. Okay. Next one is from Miko, and he says, Darrell, you've been talking about aligning drums with auto align by Sound Radix. Hold on, this thing just updated on me.
Highly recommend it.
Is it something you do every time, and is it something you do or try at the mixing stage, or even when you've chalked a project and send the tracks for another mixer, like the new Foo Fighters album with Spike Stent mixing?
Yeah, Spike got my sessions as is, and he just did his thing on top. So yeah, he got my auto align drums from the tracking session. Yeah, even if Andrew was mixing a project that I record, yeah, I would just leave it as is and let him pick what he wanted to use or what didn't want to use. Yes, I do. I don't use auto align all the time. Funny enough, I've been doing a lot of Foo Fighters live shows for Sirius XM satellite channel that just popped back online like a week ago or something. I found that when I try to auto align drums, then it just doesn't work quite well. And mostly because, I'm so sorry. Mostly because like they're not doing the traditional, like the overheads are quote unquote cymbal mics. They're not really drum overheads. They're somewhere mic clipped underneath the cymbal because it looks cooler than sounds cooler. But in the most cases, for most records that I get in or songs, singles, whatever is to mix, I usually auto align it. I like what it does. I really do. And then there's been a few cases where I pop it and bypass and I go, oh, maybe it's cooler without it. So yeah, another tool.
Cool.
Shed.
Awesome. Okay, let me just
but also auto align is to go back. Sorry, auto align on the bass, DI, and amp is fucking genius.
Awesome.
Also, if you have like, I do get a fair amount of things from people who send me like guitar DIs with their amp signal, and the two they've sent me the session with blended the two, like they're going for a certain effect. I'll also put auto align on those and line those up. That helps a lot too. It's really cool for that. But I need to talk to. I think he needs buses. Run out of buses.
Okay, next one is from Chris Jacoby, and he says, "Can you talk more about Nigel Godrich's go-tos for reverbs?"
Whatever's available. Next question. No,
nice.
Plates, chambers, springs. If I'm at Sunset Sound or United or East West, I have to have a chamber at my fingertips all times, no matter what. And because I use the console as mic pre's anyways, I can just pop a send on it and capture the chamber or the plate. I do that with United, East West, and Sunset Sound, and Capitol, especially if you're at Capitol. I know there's a plug-in, but still, it's like, come on, let's get the real thing here going. So.
Awesome. Okay, next one is from Thaddeus Correa, and he asks, when needed, do you do your own vocal tuning and drum timing corrections, or do you have an assistant do it?
Depends on the scenario. If I'm the only engineer in the room, and then it's called for me to do it, then yeah, I do it. Some producers have their guys, and so it gets sent off to their guy, and then they get to do it, which I'm fine with. But yeah, total case by case basis, I guess you could say. I don't mind drum quantizing. I really, really dislike vocal tuning. I just don't like it. And I feel like I'm not that great at it. I'm okay. When other guys who are more in tune to do it, no, it comes back from them and it just sounds fucking perfect and great. And when I do it, it's just like, sounds like a hatch job or something. I don't know.
Awesome. Okay. Vance, I'm going to throw in a quick plug here. Vance Powell's assistant, Mike Fahey, is insane to watch on Melodyne.
Really?
It's insane. It's so crazy. He can, I mean, one, he's just so fast, and then two, he's just got a really quick ear. He's great.
Good for him.
Yeah. Okay. So next question from Santiago is, hey, Darrell, thanks for doing this. Are you still using Acoustic Energy AE1s as your monitors these days?
Yes. They're sitting in front of my face as we speak.
Awesome. Okay. And this one I'm going to open to both of you guys. Sony Greenwich Jr. says, Logic Pro 10.7 just released with Atmos mixing capability. Thoughts?
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like Pro Tools. And I've mixed a project in Logic recently, so it's not like I'm back in the eMagic days with my impressions of Logic, but I did not enjoy it compared to Pro Tools. I just know Pro Tools inside out and I know how it thinks.
It's not the fact that the DAW sounds better or
couldn't care less about that.
Yeah, I don't know that it like a friend of mine, he's very well versed in both Logic and Pro Tools because of his previous client. But he's like, dude, sonically, it's whatever.
If they sound different, it's a bug, basically.
But it's just a workflow aspect. It's like, oh my God, I'm so fast. It's 26 years of, and then, I'm sure it's the same with you. I got a project in Logic, and the client was like, do you mind? Can you just keep it in Logic and mix it? And I was like, sure. I'm just slower, but I can do it. Whereas like Pro Tools, I don't fucking think. I just can go find a setting. I'm not going, oh, where is yeah, that's it.
Yeah, but I'm sure their integration is going to be awesome.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in general, Darrell, have you done any Atmos yet?
I've done a few things in Atmos. I did, obviously, years and years ago, which a lot of people still sing my praises, which I'm so honored, was when Atmos was first up and coming. So this has been about 4 years ago. I did one Foo Fighters song, Sky's a Neighborhood single in Atmos, which was a lot of fun. And then Dolby loved it so much they kept licensing repeatedly because they didn't have any rock in their album selection. So that was cool. But then I just did Deaf Heaven in Atmos, which was fun. And that's been it, actually. The Atmos thing, it's fun, it's cool, but there's a little bit there's a curve to it to learn the technical side of it. Correct, Andrew? There's a lot little nuances that you got to figure out that are a little bit frustrating, that if you don't quite figure out, you're going to screw yourself quickly, unfortunately.
Yeah, it definitely, it's a learning curve, both just, software wise and printing mixes and getting them to clients. That's totally different, but also just how things react. Like you put it in the height speakers, it's going to feel a little brighter in the headphones, and is that okay? You've now EQ'd something that shouldn't have changed, and when you move a guitar to the side, it gets louder, and so yeah, there is a lot of that, and it's kind of figuring out what liberties you can take, and that at the moment, because there's so much catalog stuff being done, it changes wildly project to project. Like sometimes it's got to absolutely be the stereo mix, only not stereo, and sometimes you can do what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't really been asked to do that much, so which is fine.
Awesome. Okay, next question is from Justin. Deaf Heaven's Infinite Granite has been a surprise favorite for me this year and a big change in their sound in a good way. Curious to hear a bit about the production, as it sounds fantastic and different from modern metal production, i.e. sample replace drums. Anything you can share on the production would be great. Thanks. And feel free to save it for part two.
I'll say this. I did put a kick drum sample in only for more boom of the kick. That was it. Then I didn't want like the typical metal replacing it just to get the beater, the typewriter sound. That wasn't my intention at all. No, because I just have this one sample that's like my go-to. Even if the kick sounds really amazing, I throw it in there underneath as just more pushing air than anything, and that's what you kind of hear out of it. As far as like the band itself, like they were the ones that really, they wanted to make a new like, sonic landscape slash experience record. And I think they did that because the songwriting's so good. That's why they hired Justin to get involved in the production of the record, which I thought it was great. I started actually in the recording side. I didn't do the basics. I started with like a lot of guitars and vocals. And then we were just going on, and they asked me to mix, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to. And so it just became this whole thing. But yeah, I'm really proud of that one because it's such a departure of what I normally do, with the exception of the Foos. But yeah, and I've gotten a lot of amazing feedback from friends and colleagues and other things about like, man, the record's so cool because they're a metal band, but I didn't treat it like a metal record, and they didn't want it to be treated like sonically like a metal record. So, and I had fun getting to know them. They're really great guys. So
awesome. Okay, we'll do last question here. This one is coming off of YouTube from Karen Bassett. And she asked, Darrell, do you think a beginning engineer would be better off starting as a studio runner or taking a job mixing live sound in terms of getting experience toward becoming a record or mix engineer?
Ooh, I would have to say that you would probably be better off getting a job as a studio runner and working your way up the ranks. I kind of feel like it's not necessarily the rule, but I kind of feel like if you were in the live sound world, you might kind of get stuck in that realm of comfort in the paycheck aspect of it, and not kind of want to start over from scratch as a studio runner, working your way up the ranks. That's my 2 cents. And I know that's how I came up. So I feel like that's the best direction for a career path, personally.
Yeah, you're not going to learn what happens in a studio being on the road. There are so many amazingly talented live sound guys. So it's not that they don't know what they're doing, but just they're doing something totally different. The other thing is, I mean, until there was a pandemic, you would never say that being a runner in a studio might be a more stable job than being on the road as a live sound guy. But they've all been out of work for 2 years. Like even just getting a gig at this point would be tough because they're all so desperate for work. I mean, you could work for a sound company, get a hold of Claire Brothers or one of the bigger companies, and they're going to have people, but you'd start off as a systems tech, you'd be loading trucks. It's going to have a lot less to do with being in the studio than being a runner.
True.
Yeah, especially if your end goal is to work on records. And
Yeah, I mean, if
mix
you
and
can
all that.
find a studio that exists that needs runners, because of course the number of studios in the world has declined immensely.
So sad.
Yeah.
Uh,
Awesome.
well, I'll say this. I don't know where this person. What was her name, Mark?
Karen Bassett.
Karen Bassett.
I mean, honestly, from my aspect, if depending on what you want to do, and I don't know where you live and what part of the world you live, but man, Nashville is thump-a-lumping. There's still a studio in every corner, and every studio is booked. It's pretty, and I say that for a guy that gets to travel to Nashville every couple of months and works there. I mean, even though I work in Dave Cobb's studio, and his studio is private, but then a couple of situations walk up where it's like, oh, well, there's multiple sessions going on, and then he's got to carry on with this other gig. But meanwhile, we need to set up 2 strings in another studio because the project's continuing on for a few days or something like that. And that happens all the time. But then the next thing you know, his manager is out there calling around to every studio. What about this place? Booked. What about Ocean Way? Booked. What about Blackbird? Booked. And it's just like, well, okay, so good for them. Great. That from my aspect scenery of it, it's like, that's, if you're wanting to get into a studio and work your way up, that seems like the only spot, minus a few particular places in LA. And at least it's cheaper to live in Nashville. It's not that cheap, but it's.
Well, and we've gotten my favorite word of the whole evening, which is thump-a-lumpin'.
I was thinking that could be a billboard. Like
Nashville is
just
thump-a-lumpin'. Yeah,
Thump-a-lumpin'.
absolutely.
It is, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of music going on. And it's not all country like it used to be.
No, it is not all country. That's the thing. So
It's a little bit country and a little bit rock and roll.
a little bit.
And on that cheesy moment, Darrell, fucking awesome.
Thank you.
So good, so good. And we've got about as much again to cover next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, when are we doing next time?
Well, I don't know. Why don't we say goodbye to the kids? I'll mute the microphone and go to a thanks for watching screen awkwardly, and then we'll see what your schedule's looking like.
Okay, cool.
All right, so I'm going to mute and we're going to wave and